a little bit of housekeeping first. If you hear the fire alarm, then please, it's for real. Leave out the double doors, go down, out the main entrance and get on the car park. Because of the level of public representation tonight and our constitution only allows for 1 hour, I am now cutting down everybody's time to speak by 1 minute. So those that normally have 3 will have 2, and those that normally have 5 will have 4. So anyway, moving swiftly on. Item 1, apologies and substitutes. Angela.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Allison, Councillor Archer, Councillor Fitzherbert, Councillor Purdy and Councillor Stavens substituted for Councillor Purdy.
Councillor Finesse.
Oh, Councillor Finesse.
Okay. Item 2.
Councillor Allison sent her apologies. Yeah, I'll give her a thing.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. I therefore move. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Item 3, interests. Anybody wanting to declare an interest in any of the business tonight? No? In which case, then we'll move straight on. But before I do, our development manager would like to appraise you of the situation of tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Just an update for members. Just so you're aware, immediately prior to publication of the agenda, an item was withdrawn from committee, which brought some of the items that were earmarked for a site visit forward by an hour. Unfortunately, this wasn't relayed to the department that sends out the notification letters to both the town and parish councils and also applicants and agents. So this meant, in the case of item 5.2 at Bent Farm, that the town council attended that meeting an hour after members visited the site, and the town council had expressed an interest in wanting to attend that meeting, and therefore it was considered inappropriate for that item to be considered at the committee this evening, which would deny them the opportunity to participate in that meeting. Even though the site visit is not a public meeting, it's merely an opportunity to appraise members of the site visit. But town council representatives are able to attend, and if prompted by members, they're able to point things out on site and answer questions in a factual manner. So we did feel that they would be prejudiced by being denied that opportunity, so we have agreed that item be withdrawn from tonight's agenda. It will be taken or considered at a future meeting. All the other items are satisfied that where we have had representation and where we have had interest from town and parish councils, they did attend the site visits and they wouldn't be prejudiced by any decisions that would be made this evening.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So anyway, moving swiftly on, application 5.1, which is application number 22/059 full, Hollycroft, Troffer Lane, Hullen Village, Derbyshire. And we've got a number of speakers on this. So the first on my list is Mr. Simon Dutton, local resident, to speak against the application. You have 2 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left. So you'd like to go to the
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Simon Dunn and I live at Hall Cottages, which is directly opposite Hollycroft, where I've lived for over 20 years. I strongly oppose the proposed new agricultural access, which is being sought after because, in my opinion, it isn't required. The detail of the access proposal is very scarce, with limited detail on the block plan, which is only in 2 dimensions. It doesn't take into account the height difference of 3 metres between the hedge and the road surface, which is vital details are missing from the plans. Based on the scale, the proposal seeks to remove just over 3 metres of hedge to place a gate. It's obvious that little time has been spent on the proposal, as the ground level is 3 metres higher, so the gradient from the road to the hedge is 1 in 2. No thought has been given on how an agricultural vehicle will access this due to the width of the road. The field itself is 30 metres from the road and a height of 3.65 metres. And the highways recommend a gradient of less than 1 in 10, and this gradient will actually be 1 in 8. There's been no consideration about retaining, which will be required along the full length of this access on both sides. At the point where the access goes through the hedge, it will actually be 2.4 metres below the hedge line, and there's no detail of this retaining. So if you use a 45-degree rule,
30 seconds left.
this will require 8 metres of hedge to be removed at a minimum. I've actually calculated the amount of soil and they would need to remove 150 cubic metres, which is over 200 tonnes. This is not a simple access. The block plan shows no splay onto the road, which is only 4.5 metres. The current driveway to Hollycroft is 3.3 metres with a 7.5 metre splay, which in my opinion is more than enough for that access to the field. So I ask you to refuse this request for unnecessary third access to a small field. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next on my list is Mrs. June Holden, local resident, to speak against the application. Similarly, you have 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Good evening, all. June Holden, Green Hills, lived in the village for over 23 years, and Cobscroft, Hollycroft backs onto my property. My concern is the impact upon Holland Village Conservation Area. Removal of an ancient mature hedge in this conservation area, even partially, does not maintain, enhance or conserve the area's distinct landscape characteristics, biodiversity and cultural and historic environment. I refer to the Derbyshire Dales District Council Strategic Objectives SO5. My understanding is that in order to develop this access to the field, then up to 8.5 metres of this holly hedge in a designated conservation area would have to be removed. In the Planning Committee report, it says 3.6 metres of hedgerow. How has this decision been taken? Until yesterday, the Conservation and Design Officer had not visited the site. If you look at policy PD6, hedgerows and woodlands, it states, trees and hedgerows of value should be retained and integrated within development plans. Does the part removal of this mature hedge in a conservation area contravene your own policy? 5.43, climate change. Your policy is a national priority. The policy states it's a national priority. Reducing carbon emissions is a statutory duty embedded in the Climate Change Act of 2008. You only need to look at today's extreme weather, excessive heat, and in winter increased rainfalls, especially in 2021. The increased rainwater coming down the village will be of serious concern to many villagers. The increased rainwater coming down the village...
30 seconds left.
PD5, landscape characteristics, trees, hedgerows. 5.39, trees and hedgerows make an important contribution to the beauty, diversity and distinctive of the district, reduce soil erosion and the leaching of pollutants into surface and groundwater. I've also referred to the Woodland Trust, but I haven't got time to mention that now. Mature holly hedges, 20 metres long, and refer to the government's UK Countryside and Hedgerows Protection and Management document. Please save our mature holly hedge and bank. It's
Thank
the
you very
gateway
much,
to the
Mrs.
village.
Holden.
Thank you.
The next on my list is Mr. Roy Starbuck, local resident, speaking against the application. You have 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Roy Starbuck, Holland Village. I'm here to give my reasons for objecting to this proposed new driveway, giving additional access to the paddock at Hollycroft, formerly known as Cobscroft, in Holland Village. Cobscroft is a property with a 2-acre grazing paddock with 2 existing access to this paddock. One is a main substantial driveway to the property from Trough Lane, and the other is a rear gate owned by the Souls, which has been used historically as agricultural access for many years. The 2-acre grazing paddock is currently being used for sheep grazing by a local farmer, and to do this, access is required for a truck and a trailer, and the existing front drive with an ample turning area has always been more than adequate for this purpose. This has been the case for at least 20 years and probably more. The only other reason for access to this paddock are to cut the hedge once a year, which requires a tractor with a hedge cutter, and to top off the grass twice yearly, which requires a tractor with a topper. Both of these have been carried out for many years using appropriately sized machinery without any problem. So why an additional driveway is being requested? I believe the Souls have referred to one occasion when they couldn't use the rear access they couldn't use the rear access due to major mains waterworks being carried out by Severn Trent, and the other point was that a tractor should not be driven over their water main which runs under their garden. Neither of these points are valid.
30 seconds left.
As the lack of access was being purely one-off and temporary problem, and there's absolutely no evidence that the use of the main drive is any way compromises the water main. I believe Mr. and Mrs. Sewell have given little or no thought to the impact and additional unnecessary driveway, which was onto an already very busy narrow trough lane. Perhaps the Sauls eventually, when they eventually move into the property, which they have purchased
Thank you very
almost
much,
2
Mr.
years
Stelman.
ago. Thank you. I sincerely urge this committee to turn down this proposal.
Thank you. Next on my list is Mr. John Fell, local resident, to speak against the application. You have 2 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Good evening. John Fell, the Deanery, home for 37 years. We as a village have no objections to the alterations to the bungalow. However, in our opinion, the plans for another entrance to the paddock are totally unacceptable for the following reasons. There are no proper plans of the driveway. In Mr. and Mrs. Shaw's response to the objections under access to the field, saying it is not sustainable for farm machinery to cross the Severn Trent water mains, farm machinery using the original entrance has passed over these pipes with no damage being done. The Severn Trent pipes are buried to a specification of 1.5 metres already, so farm vehicles can pass over them without causing damage. I would like to bring to your attention to your own policy document S4. 4.29R states will have a safe access and will not generate traffic of a type which would cause severe impacts or require improvements or alterations to the rural road which could be detrimental to the character. In my opinion, it is definitely not safe. It will impact on the lane, the drives opposite, will encroach onto the property next door and the Severn Trent water main. 4.29T states that it does not conflict with any part of the local plan. In my opinion, it does conflict with your local plan with the steepness of the drive and the removal of some of the hedgerow. Policy S4 also states it is supportive of development that helps existing agricultural enterprises. This is not an agricultural enterprise, it already has 2 entrances. In conclusion, the creation of this new access is contrary to the local plan S4 rather than being compliant.
30 seconds left.
The necessary works to create a new access in the location will be detrimental to the sensitive character of this rural road. The steep gradient of the verges in which hedgerow is growing would undoubtedly make access problematic without regrading, resulting in significant hedgerow loss and environmental damage. Is this justified in order to enable the benefits alleged by the applicants? I therefore ask the Planning Committee to reject the application for new access to the paddock. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The last on my list is Mr. Peter Sewell, who is the applicant, to speak in favour of the application. You have 4 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
To the Chair and members of the committee, the property comprises a bungalow with a field attached, and my wife and I are the owners. There are no third parties to be consulted or involved with the application except for the architect Darren Archer of Channel Design Ashbourne. The property is outside of the conservation area. The application is to refurbish the property with a view to improving the aesthetic look by adding a front porch and a rear extension. The external rendering proposed will increase the energy performance. The property will need to serve our needs in the short and long term, whilst making sure that we can afford all the associated costs of running a home. The field has been neglected over many years and the grazing land is poor quality. We are looking to improve the overall biodiversity of the field and to increase our enjoyment of it. The new agricultural access to our field from the road is for 2 main reasons as follows. Number 1, to avoid crossing the Severn Trent water mains pipework located in our front lawn. And secondly, to segregate agricultural vehicles from the activities in the garden and driveway around the bungalow and thereby increase our enjoyment in safety. There is one agricultural access into the field from our garden. The adjoining gate between neighbouring property and our field is, as the land registry document states, and I quote, for the purpose of cutting and maintaining any boundary hedge between the property and adjoining land, end of quote. Access at any other time and for any other purpose has to be applied for, and we wish to have more autonomy regarding the work in our field. Note, this is the gate that has been referred to by villagers as a second access, which it is not. The highways have been consulted and their response states no objections. Their recommendation that the drain be altered was made expediently by Channel Design and promptly returned to the highways. The agricultural access is not a new idea. The previous owners engaged with the planning pre-app process in 2008 and the response they received indicated there were no objections subject to a full planning application. In response to comments regarding the removal of a small section of hedge from the front garden, it should be noted that the hedge is within the curtilage of Hollycroft and is a garden hedge, which is not protected by hedgerow legislation. Our site has been viewed by 2 separate planning officers and a conservation officer who all independently of each other have concluded that there will be no detriment to the adjacent conservation area by the removal of some of this hedge. The final design is the result of an extensive and meticulous evaluation over recent months and through the engagement of the pre-application process. The consultation of the relevant departments has resulted in the proposals being fully supported by the consultees in terms of highways, conservation officer and the planning officer. As part of our diligent process, we have also consulted with the relevant departments of Severn Trent Water and also civil engineers who have expertise and experience in this area of work. The lead of the village committee boasts that it was agreed there would be no new development for Holland Village.
30 seconds left.
And furthermore, our field lies outside of the residential boundary. This means that any new housing development would be almost impossible. And finally, we believe that the locally generated, ill-informed campaign against our proposals is based on guesswork, hearsay, and assumptions, some of which we are of the opinion could be viewed as libelous. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Anyway, members, before I move on to the officer, there's some late representation, so I'll let you read through them first. Okay, members? Want a little more time? Are you happy? Okay then. Hand over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the late representations that have been received, a further item of late representation was made following the publication of the late representation sheet. This is correspondence from the local ward member following contact that they had from a local resident, reiterating really some of the comments that have been made from the previous speakers, namely inadequacies with the plans that have been submitted and the fact that they don't show a difference in levels between the existing site and the carriageway. Reference is made to a 3-metre drop from the garden onto the road. Insufficient information in relation to the display onto the road to ensure safe turning and visibility onto what is referred to as a 60-mile-an-hour stretch of road. And reference is also made in the comments to the local highway authority's desk-based assessment of the application, and it's indicated that this was carried out without the benefit of a site inspection, and had a site inspection been undertaken, the engineer would have appreciated those issues. So I think it's just important that members are aware of that late representation from the local ward member. Just addressing some of the comments from the speakers, I think some of those have been addressed by the applicant, in that the hedgerow, well, the site, first of all, isn't within the conservation area, it's adjacent to the conservation area, so just confirm that that is the correct position. And the hedgerow does fall within a domestic property, so isn't afforded the same level of protection as an ancient hedgerow within on agricultural land, for example. Members visited the site yesterday, and there's two components or two elements to the application. There's the alterations and extensions to the property. So we've got the refacing works to the existing bungalow, and the application of insulated render to the exterior walls. We've got the porch extension, and we've got the rear and side extensions to the property. Officers consider that the nature of those alterations and extensions are acceptable in terms of meeting policy requirements, and that's all set out in the officer report. The main or the most contentious element of this application is the new access. Officers are satisfied with the justification given, set out at section 7.9 of the officer's report, which indicates the access is required to provide safe access to the land, and the difficulties experienced currently with the existing access, which is too narrow to accommodate the width of vehicles that need to access that land. Members in considering this application need to consider whether they're satisfied that this access is necessary to sustain the needs of agriculture on that holding. We feel as officers there's appropriate justification. We feel that with conditions to control details of the gradient and the landscaping of the site frontage and the treatment of and any engineering works of the access, that an appropriate level and nature of development can be achieved without harm to the character and appearance of this part of the village. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Oh, members, questions. Councillor O'Brien.
Sorry, I had a comment, not a question, Chair, sorry.
Well, in which case I'll wait for debate. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, is there any reason why the planning highways officer didn't go out? I mean, this is the important issue, this driveway, isn't it, really? Is there any reason why he didn't attend, go out to look at it?
I think that's a question that's probably best directed to the engineer, but as suggested by the applicant, this proposal was subject to a pre-application inquiry some years ago, and the Highway Authority may have had regard to that earlier advice and didn't feel it was necessary to carry out further site assessment, having given that advice back in, I think it was 2008.
Not good policy, is it, really, to not look at it? Well, there you go. Thank you, Chris.
Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could you just tell us what the difference in width is on the new entrance to the existing entrance, please? Is one question. And the other one is, does the new entrance, does it actually encroach on the neighbouring land?
Just to clarify, I'll answer the second question whilst we take measurements of the existing and proposed access. The application site areas, as shown on the image that's on the PowerPoint presentation, so all of the land outlined red has been indicated to fall within the ownership of the applicant, and that covers the access in terms of the point of access onto this part of Trough Lane, but also the proposed roadway. If you're referring to visibility displays, then the Highway Authority will have had regard to that site location plan, and they'll have had a look at the highway margin between the site and that carriageway edge to be satisfied that sufficient level of visibility can be provided.
So if the neighbour decided to build a hedge right down his boundary, right onto the edge of the road, then that would encroach the visibility display?
It would, but it Highway Authority in commenting that they have no objections must be satisfied that that visibility can be achieved over the highway margin. So in effect, anyone who was doing that would be effectively planting a hedge on highway land.
Okay. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. We've had other planning applications where hedges have been wanted to be removed, and those applications have been refused. Chris, do you have any comment on why this is acceptable when other applications we've refused planning applications which have involved removal of hedges so that car parking spaces can be put in front of suburban houses? So I can think of one in Wirksworth and another one in another village where we refused the removal of quite ordinary suburban hedges. We refused the application on the basis that it would require removal of quite ordinary suburban hedges. And in this case, we're talking about a traditional hedge, which is... so what is the difference between this case where we're allowing it and possibly 8 metres of hedge to be removed, and in those cases where there was perhaps 3 metres of hedge to be removed and replaced ultimately with a hedge further back?
Yeah, we obviously assess each application on its merits. I can think of a couple of examples that have been considered by planning committee. I think in this particular case, and thinking about some of perhaps the examples that you might also be thinking of, is very much an assessment on the need for the development and the impact on the environment. So the amount of hedgerow to be removed is an important consideration, and the indication here to facilitate the access is that a 3.6 metre section of hedge needs to be removed. That's what's presented as part of the application, and we're looking to control the detail of that hedgerow removal by condition. In the case of some of the other examples that I'm thinking of, we were dealing with wholesale removal of the entire hedgerow, which would be more harmful in my view than the partial removal and controls to condition retention of hedgerow to maintain the rural character of the lane in this particular case.
Okay, the ones that I'm thinking of would only have removed a portion of the hedgerow, one in Wirksworth in particular, and but also then if it comes down to need, is there a need if there's already an access to this field?
That's for members to consider as a policy requirement. Policy S4 is that we're supportive of development that helps sustain agriculture, the needs of agriculture. The applicant has put forward a justification as part of the application as to why they need a separate access to facilitate or access the land that they control beyond the residential curtilage. It's for members to consider whether they feel that is appropriate justification to allow for an access in this location and the associated impacts.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, looking at your comment on the gradient, you're saying the fact that we need to condition that. Is that correct?
It would be prudent to do that because we haven't, I think the speakers were right in that we have got a basic amount of information in terms of the general position of the roadway and the nature of the access, and we'd want to control that was appropriate to the location. So hence why we're recommending condition here to control those details and any associated engineering and landscaping works.
Surely we should have that information here to be able to make determination on the application.
I think if members were concerned about the visual impact of those works and felt that they needed that information in order to make an informed decision on this application, then I think that could provide legitimate grounds for deferment of the application if members were minded to go down that route.
Can I come back on that again? So what you're saying on that, Chris, would that be then appropriate, or would that be to look probably to deferment or not?
If members were satisfied that through condition officers could control the appearance of this access so that it was acceptable in policy terms, and they're happy to give authority to officers to be able to do that, then that's within your gift as planning committee member. However, if you wanted to consider those details before making a decision on this application as a member of the planning committee, then you'd be best, in my view, deferring the application so you could consider those those aspects of the proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you. It would seem to me that the formation of this new access is the controversial part of this application, big time. So, and I think I probably know the answer to this question, but is it within our remit as planning committee to say to the officer, go to the county council and say, you must come and look at this site? I mean, I know that they cannot possibly go to every site of every planning application, but because of the controversial nature of this one, I would have thought that that was something that we should be asking for. It happens too many times, as Councillor Sachs said. So I'm kind of leaning towards a deferral.
I think that could potentially form part of a deferment reason. So you could include as part of that in submitting further details of the access, that those details are considered by the local highway authority by visiting the site, and if they don't visit the site, to explain the reasons why they don't consider it appropriate to visit the site. So that can be shared with members.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Does I'm talking about the access way, the new access way. Does the work have to be proportionate to the application, as it were? Like, if they're going to be removing, say, 200 tonnes, as suggested by one of the members of the public, would we think that is a reasonable thing to be done? And if we're conditioning something, we're having 200 or 300 tonnes of earth removed in a massive works for something that's only going to be used a few times a year by a tractor, it seems slightly disproportionate for the amount of the earthworks in consideration. And is that something that would come into the scope of any conditioning that you would be bringing to bear on the works that are going to be done to make the access safe?
I think we've already touched on this to some degree, in that the condition does seek to agree any engineering works. However, if members felt that they would need to see those details before making a decision on this application, then that would form part of the reason for deferral. I think I can't verify whether, did you say 200 tonnes of material needs to be
removed from the site? The gentleman here mentioned 200 tonnes, and right. You know, there's a certain sort of climate change impact there, isn't there, moving large quantities of material around the countryside, and whether or not for just popping over the edge of the garden with the tractor, whether or not it is a proportionate solution to their issues. So I'm wondering if that's something that is applicable. Can we ask about this? Does it matter?
It certainly is, and it's something that we were equally concerned about, hence why we recommended a condition to agree those details. But if members felt that they would want to consider those details prior to giving authority to issue a decision on this current application, I think that's perfectly reasonable to request deferment of the application.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move into debate. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could I just have clarification on part one of my question, please?
Yes, sorry, I did. So we've calculated the width of the proposed access is 3.6 metres. The width of the driveway is 4 metres. However, what that doesn't show is that you've got modest, members that visited the site yesterday will have seen that you've got modest retaining structures either side of the existing driveway, whereas the treatment of the land either side of the proposed access, I'd have thought that would allow ease of access for larger machinery. But the roadway width is only 3.6 metres proposed.
Come back in debate, please.
Okay, so we're in debate now, so Councillor Donnelly and then Councillor Councillor O'Brien first then.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I agree 100% with the sentiment expressed by Councillor Donnelly. I mean, to give a perspective, if we looked at the application for alterations and extension to the dwelling, and we were told, I'm sorry, we have no details of that, but we'd like you to approve it, we would say no, go back and let us have the details so we can consider what the alterations and extension look like. Now here on a highway, we're being asked the same question. We've been asked to approve an access without any detail as to what the construction is, what it looks like, and more importantly, what effect on the character of the lane and the village will have. And I think we're just not in a position to make that decision. So I would move that while we approve the alterations and extension to the building, in relation to condition 4, I move that consideration of the element of the application relating to the proposed access is deferred pending receipt of full constructional details of the access to enable the impact on the lane and the conservation area to be properly assessed. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Brien, if you want to move for deferral, you have to defer the whole item, not just the element of the access. It is one application.
Well, I'm moving that condition 4 is deleted and replaced by the statement I've just read out to you, given that the application is recommendations are phrased in that way.
I will let Chris come back on that.
Yeah, only the Secretary of State has the power to issue a split decision on a planning application. The applicant has indicated that they want the application to be determined as submitted, so we have to make a decision on the application as a whole. So my suggestion would be to defer the entire application whilst we receive additional information in relation to the access and then consider it as a whole as part of a consideration at a future meeting.
I'd be happy to accept that observations of our officer's chair and simply omit consideration of that element. I move that the application is deferred pending receipt of details as I read out earlier.
So I found a second of Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's a wise decision.
Councillor Sack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with the proposer and the seconder. This access will probably be only used once or twice a year. I can't see what the other access is quite a good access. If it needs widening, that could be widened. The present access, there's no need for 2 accesses at all. It's inappropriate altogether. So I agree with the.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you very much. So there's nobody else set down on my list. You'll have to be a little bit quicker than that, Councillor Hughes, because we've got a very big agenda. I'd like to get through it. So I'll allow it this time.
No, I'll give way.
Thank you very much then. It's been moved and seconded to defer it for the reason set out by Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Donnan. All those in favour of deferral, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So it's been carried unanimously to defer it. As you know, item 5.2 has been withdrawn, as Chris has said. What we'll do now is we'll wait for the room to be cleared so we can have the next lot of people in for item 5.3.
There were two applications. All we're going to do is make an insert into a hedge in front of the house and build a hedge around it. What's it called? What's it called? The hedges that they build on the council steps. God, we haven't heard. No.
You think you'd have to build something out and his access is there? I think so.
Yeah. What about this next one? Steve Wayne was very anti the next one. Steve Wayne was very anti. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's within the tutelage of the site, isn't it? They'd have to find somewhere else to build it if they didn't build it there.
It's a bit ironic.
Thank you very much, members. This is item 5.3, application number 22/00398 full, Ivanbrook Residential Care Home, Eversley Rise, Darleybridge, Matlock. So we have got quite a few speakers on this. So the first on my list is Miss Diane MacArthur, local resident, speaking against the application. You have 2 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Right. I live at 22 Eversley Rise. If the new unit at Ivanbrook goes ahead, it will see my house hemmed in and almost become a part of the complex because it virtually sits within their grounds. The plans basically ignore the existence of my house. No attention is drawn to any detrimental impact. The unit will be closer to me than to their own offices. I'm going to feel like a resident because of 24-hour functioning of the site and activity surrounding me. The environment created and operating of the business will be seen, heard and felt continuously, day and night, 7 days a week. I understand there's a need for more dementia care and that the provision of it is a growth industry, but should the quality of life for those living nearby be sacrificed? My concerns include the close proximity of excavations and the potential for damage to the structure of my house, drainage and pipework as they are located on their land, and the collapse of the retaining wall. My garden wall may be 6 foot high, but it's only 2 feet the other side. So due to the differences in ground levels, I can see the grass, deer, wildlife, trees and sky. This will all go, and I will look down on the entire built site from my upstairs rooms. The unit is only 9 metres from my boundary and 12 metres from my house, and the roof height 1/2 metre higher than my roof at the closest
30 seconds
point.
left.
Sorry? Okay. The car park may be 3 metres away after amending it from just 90 centimetres, but that is still very close. Privacy, proximity, noise, visual impact, loss of green amenity, risk of damage during construction, these are my concerns. Just imagine if number 22 is your house. What a nightmare. I'm objecting to these plans on behalf of my house.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCarthy.
Okay.
The next on my list is Miss Hannah Shakespeare, local resident, speaking against the application. You have 2 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. You need to turn the microphone on, please.
Thank you. We live at Willow Grange, and that's directly opposite Ivanbrook, and we're here to ask you to refuse. We're not serial objectors. We're good neighbours. We didn't complain at all when they wanted to put in a sunroom and a courtyard. We didn't complain when they turned one of the buildings into an Airbnb. It's fine, but what they're proposing now is just too far. On Limekiln Lane, the surface of the road is completely destroyed. I have a disability. I find it hard to walk on because it's more pothole than it is actual road surface. And that is being damaged day in, day out already by the heavy vehicles that are coming up and down the road to Ivanbrook. And yeah, that's only going to increase. Our wall is frequently damaged by the big lorries that come up and down. Mostly the culprits don't bother to stick around and give their details. So we have to pay for that. And this damage and distress will increase. You'll hear from some of my neighbours about the loss of green space, which is important, but also let me tell you about the flash flooding. Ours is the only property at the moment that floods. When there's heavy rain, the water courses down the road from Ivanbrook's car park. It overwhelms the soakaway that we've got and runs straight into our garage to a depth of 4 inches. If we allow building on what is essentially a great big green sponge, it won't be just our house that floods in future. It'll be Springfield, it'll be the barn, it'll be the Pines, it'll be every house on Ivanbrook. And what Darleybridge needs is fewer houses that flood regularly, not more. For these reasons, we're here asking you to please refuse this application.
Thank you very much. Next on my list is Miss Anna Toller, local resident, speaking against application. You have 2 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I'm Anne Toller, resident of 12 Eversley Rise, which is on the corner of Limekiln Lane. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Limekiln Lane and Ivanbrook Close, that is the access roads for the care home. Tourism is important in Darley Bridge as much as in the wider Dale. Within the close vicinity of the care home, there are 5 or 6 premises which are used to host tourist accommodation and are a vital part of the income for some residents of the village. An increase in the size of the nearby large commercial care unit, which runs 24/7, plus construction and delivery lorries, noise and traffic, and the poor visual impact of all this going on will mean both the process of building and the finished building will make the village more commercial and less attractive to tourists. Secondly, and more specifically, noise. Our side living room and bedroom windows face onto Limekiln Lane, as do the front windows of the other houses on the lane. There's no pavement and less than a metre separating us from lorries, commercial delivery vehicles, commercial waste lorries, which frequently come between 6 and 7 a.m, visitors' cars, and ambulances and staff cars passing at all hours. On Friday last, a large delivery lorry parked on Eversley Rise directly opposite our house. A smaller forklift truck vehicle descended from it and carried building materials up the lane. The noise was immense as it beeped all the way and bumped into the potholes. We dread months of this construction work, in addition to an overall increase in noise once it's completed. Thank you for hearing our concerns. We ask you to refuse this application.
Thank you very much. The next on my list is Colin, the ward member. You have 4 minutes, Colin. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Good evening, colleagues. I'm here this evening as the ward member and on behalf of South Darley Parish Council to ask you to refuse this application. To start with, I ask members to keep in mind that there is no obligation for this development to be used for dementia care if permission is granted. I therefore ask members not to get caught up in the emotive issue of dementia care and keep attention solely on planning matters. The site lies outside of the settlement boundary and it will result in the loss of a beautiful green area of green field. The Parish Council and I strongly oppose any development in this location. The green space, as you've heard, should be retained and kept free from development, as in the event of heavy rain, it acts as a soakaway and prevents water runoff to the properties further down the hillside. The green space is a grazing land for local deer. It is home to newts and is the migration route for toads and frogs. It should be protected. Moving on to the development itself, it is too large for the location. It would increase the overall footprint of the nursing home by 80% and it will be visible from many local viewpoints despite being a single-storey building. It is huge. The proposed extension will have an undisputed and devastating impact on neighbouring properties. Many residents already living there endure but tolerate around-the-clock activities, noise and disturbances from the nursing home. Diane, the resident of number 22, Eversley Rise, will be the worst affected. The proposed extension will come within metres of her house and at its closest point will be taller than her own property. It almost consumes her home and garden and it's almost as if the applicant didn't even know her house existed. From Diane's property, the development will be seen from numerous angles, from over the wall in the backyard, the kitchen window and the upstairs bedrooms. Diane's view of forest and green space will become bricks and car park. There will be a loss of privacy at number 22 through the upstairs windows, which directly overlook the proposed car park. Properties 22 to 32 Eversley Rise back onto the development site, and they will be affected by the proposed extension, the car park and the increase in the 24/7 activities of the business and the disturbances it brings. There will be additional vehicle movements from staff, visitors, healthcare workers, service vehicles, refuse wagons and ambulances that will be seen and heard from these properties day and night. Car parks also create noise from people congregating, talking, smoking, slamming doors, lights from cars and blue flashing lights from ambulances from around-the-clock activities. This will be bad for all properties on Eversley Rise, but for number 22, however, the car park is located directly over the garden wall. Disturbances will be heard at all hours. At the site visit yesterday, members were told that the nearest property was at least 35 metres from the proposed extension. This is inaccurate. Number 22 is less than 12 metres from the proposed extension and in direct eye line. The office to the rear of number 26 is only 17 metres from the development, and the gardens and of the properties on Eversley Rise are closer than the suggested 35 metres. All properties will be subjected to increased levels of noise from the proposed facility. For the residents of Limekill Lane, the increase in vehicle movements to and from the extended facility will cause further disturbance and damage to the roads and their properties. It is already in a state of despair, used by oversized vehicles,
30 seconds left,
accessing the nursing home, hitting potholes, and the ironworks making loud noises, damage to the walls and the properties, the regular blue flashing lights causing distress. The residents there should not be subject to more. Finally, members, I ask you to consider how you would feel if you arrived home tonight to find a planning application for a 24/7 business right outside your back garden. Please refuse the application.
Thank you very much, Colin. Right, the next on my list is Mr. Mike Andrews. I think you previously used to live up Darnley Dale. Did you previously used to live in Darnley Dale? Up Whitworth Road? Oh, right. No, Whitworth Road in Darnley Dale. I think you lived at one time of day, yes. So anyway, you have 2 minutes, and there's 30 seconds left. I'll let you know.
I'm Mike Andrews, speaking on behalf of 24 to 30 Eversley Rise. We ask that you refuse this application on the following grounds. The tree screening on which the application relies does not fully cover number 22, 24 or 30. What screening there is leafless through the winter months. The new car park follows the contour of the land. Manoeuvring vehicles will directly face the rear bedrooms of 24. Disruption will be caused by lights, doors slamming and running engines at all hours. My wife has been employed as a home worker for 7 years, and her office is adjacent to our boundary wall with an opening window in the rear. This window is 17 metres from the proposed development. This is less than 21 metres considered acceptable. She experiences disruption from beeping alarms and in the past has been disturbed by shouting from Ivanbrook patients. Several of our bedrooms are to the rear of our properties, and since staff members have started taking breaks to the rear of Ivanbrook building, we often hear their conversations at night. The lights from the rear of Ivanbrook shine into our upper rooms. This will be amplified by the proposal. Our gardens are already waterlogged during the winter months. This has caused the void beneath number 24 to fill with water. The loss of drainage on the hillside and its replacement with thousands of square feet of impermeable
30
concrete
seconds left.
will worsen this situation for us and residents further down. The ecological impacts and loss of green space that this proposal will cause seems to have been dismissed out of hand. I wonder at what point this becomes unacceptable. We hope you were able to walk the perimeter. If you did, we trust you'll reject the proposal. If you didn't, please do so and defer the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyway, members, there's some late reps on this. There's quite a bit, actually, so I'll give you a nod when I think you've read through it. Is everybody happy, or do you want a bit more time? Everybody happy now? Yep. Anyway, this is Adam. This is the new principal officer, taken over from Chris. Anyway, welcome to your first committee, Adam, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for an extension to create a dementia unit for the existing care home. The extension is acceptable in principle, and we feel has been justified for the reasons set out in the report. One key issue that has occurred is the impact upon amenity of neighbouring properties, particularly number 22. We have looked quite closely at the impact on neighbouring properties and sought additional information from the applicant in terms of the precise distances and angles between the properties. And we have also sought amended plans to reduce the amount of number of parking spaces in the new car park and to create a landscape buffer between them. And subject to that, we are satisfied that the development can be accommodated without harm to the amenity of neighbouring properties. The extension wouldn't cause an unacceptable loss of light or be overbearing, and in general terms is a high standard of design and materials which we feel is appropriate for the character of the area and the setting of nearby properties. Dealing with a couple of issues raised, one issue was in terms of flooding and surface water. A drainage strategy was submitted with the application which addresses this, which essentially proposes to maintain drainage at greenfield levels plus climate change, and the lead local flood authority has been consulted on that and raises no objection, and surface water flooding. And subject to conditions, we consider that the application demonstrates and can be accommodated on the site without harm to trees and ecology, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Right, questions? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question about whether there was anything to do with drainage on the site. You've answered that one, so thank you for that. Screening, car park noise and light. Are there any the conditions about screening? Is one obscuring one window? Are there any other conditions that can be put in place to screen the car park from the from neighbours and to avoid overlooking? Can there be a condition to repair Limekiln Lane after construction is completed, so that because the construction will definitely cause damage to the lane by the sound of things, could the building be removed away? There's plenty of car parking space. There's car parking space the other side of the building. Why couldn't the building be moved laterally away from the houses on the main road? And could alternative parking arrangements be put in place rather than relying on just on surface parking? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the car park and the landscaping buffer, that is, the details of that are subject to a condition 13, which is, it's a general condition about hard and soft landscaping, but that would include planting and fencing and the level of the car park. So all that would be agreed. with a view to, making sure not that the landscaping was okay in itself, but also it protected the immunity of neighbouring properties. Limekill Lane, I think the only real concern in terms of damage would be during construction. We haven't recommended a condition, but if members thought it was necessary, we could impose a condition requiring a condition survey be done, and that the lane is returned to that condition once development is complete. In terms of the application, why it has been done in this way, the applications have been submitted for this extension, and we have to make an assessment on the application on its merits. And we have carefully looked at the car park and the distance to neighbours, and we've come to the conclusion that it is acceptable and it doesn't harm the immunity of neighbouring properties. So the recommendation is given on that basis.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
Yes, just one coming back on you on the screening. I think I would prefer a tighter condition that with an objective, clear objective within the condition, stating that it was to avoid light pollution and noise pollution of neighbouring properties and to avoid neighbouring properties being overlooked.
Yeah, if members feel that is appropriate, then we could essentially bring that out and do a specific condition. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Burford.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got two questions. Am I correct in thinking that the new staff car park, which is 3 metres from number 22 Eversley Rise, is that the one with the movement sensitive lighting, I think we call it, which presumably would operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Is that correct?
There aren't any detailed lighting proposals in the application. As in static lighting on the ground, you mean? Or do you mean lighting from headlights of the cars?
Well, I must have seen somewhere in the report that it talks about movement sensitive lighting, which means to me that as soon as a car approaches or leaves, some kind of lighting comes on, and that would be 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I think there is a condition about agreeing a lighting scheme, and I think we would be very cautious about avoiding that sort of scenario.
Where have I got the idea of movement sensitive lighting from then? I can try and find it, but it was when I read it.
If you would, please, Sue. It's all right. We could be here for a long time.
I think the simple answer is that we would want to agree the precise details of all lighting to avoid any issues with lights coming on and off or any glare, and that would be very important.
So, looking at the representations that we've received, oh gosh, on the top of the pages aren't numbered, are they? It says, this is from number 24 Eversley Rise, it says that the car park slopes up towards the new build that follows the natural slope of the land. That means that vehicles will be parked at the same level as my bedroom window. So, is that correct? And when it says, well, how close is it to this bedroom window?
That shows the relationship, if you can see that. The plans submitted do show the car park on the existing level. We do think there is scope for it to be dug down more. And then basically the car headlights levels will be coming in at the level of the boundary wall, if you can see that on there.
Answer your question, Councillor Burford? In a roundabout sort of way, I suppose. Councillor Slack.
Thank you. Some of my questions have been David's put and Sue's put. But one question I did want to really put, I was on the site visit yesterday, I was very concerned that the dementia unit is quite close to the residential properties. And I thought, well, really, they should have really sited it in a different position, because they could have adjusted it and put it further back, but it links onto the other building, so it's convenience rather than really looking at the best place to put it. Dementia units can be very noisy. Patients can make noise. And I did ask at the time on the site visit if there would be any special soundproofing to the dementia unit, but I think the officer said there wouldn't no indication that anybody had put this forward. So that's an issue which we ought really be discussing. It's got to be soundproof really for you know, it's for dignity of residents really. It needs to be away from the main road really.
Chris is going to answer some of that for you.
Thank you, Councillor Slack. You'll note from the officer's report that no objections have been raised from the council's environmental health team, but that doesn't mean that officers shouldn't have concerns about the impacts of this development on the residential amenity of the occupants of neighbouring properties. I think if members were concerned about the activity that's taking place within the building, the potential disturbance that may result in or cause to the occupants of existing dwellings, that the condition to agree the measures to mitigate noise outbreak from the proposed use, the details of those measures shall be submitted to us and approved in writing, and we can consider those to incorporate such measures into the design of the extension. If you felt that was appropriate, then and warranted,
if it could be looked into, to see a soundproofing,
for you to be satisfied that you're happy to support the application.
But I'm still convinced it's not the ideal place for it to be. It should be further set back further in the site rather. I know it'll separate it from the main care home, but that's not the issue really. It looks to be an issue of convenience, linking it onto the main care home. So that's my point, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, reading the comments on page 11 by, imagine, our visitors. Looking at this here, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but we've got 16 extra places, and yet we're going to create 4 new jobs. That seems rather strange.
I'm not obviously an expert in care provision for patients with dementia illness, and I think the nature of that illness, from my understanding, is it's quite debilitating, and obviously you need quite a lot of care. So it perhaps is a true reflection of the level of staffing that would be required to accommodate even that modest number of bedroom spaces.
Thank you, Chris. Well, having worked in social service myself, I think that those numbers are a little bit low. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else wanting to question? Councillor O'Brien, then I'll go into debate.
Yes, 2 questions, Chair. Firstly, can you tell me if during the process of preparing the local plan in 2017, Ivanbrook made any representations as regards the location of the development boundary, which currently excludes this site from future development? That's my first question. And my second question echoes a little bit Councillor Donnelly's. The applicants have proposed car parking provision 150% in excess of what the policy suggests. Given we're trying to reduce dependency on private car, did you raise that issue with the applicants during the appraisal process? And in addition, did you ask the applicants to consider a design proposal where there are not 2 separate car parks, but they look to rationalise the parking by way of a single car park and a rationalisation to provide a single access? Did you have those discussions with them during your appraisal of the application?
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Just addressing the last question first. The application obviously was submitted or presented to us on an as-submitted basis, and we looked at the car parking arrangement. We raised concerns about the layout of the car parking spaces proposed immediately adjacent to the nearest residential property, and sought modifications to the application order for it to be deemed acceptable to us in planning terms. In your role as planning committee member, if you felt that that car parking area was unacceptable from a residential amenity point of view, you feel that the development is only acceptable without that parking area, you could impose a condition that that a revised plan showing alternative parking or parking arrangements that exclude that parking area. That's within your gift to recommend that condition, but you need to satisfy yourself that it was necessary in planning terms in order to do that. Officers haven't had those discussions with the applicant. We've considered the application as submitted, and we've considered the proposal and agreed modifications so that it was acceptable to us in planning terms. Could I ask that you just repeat the first question for me?
This was, Chris, this was in relation to the settlement development boundary, which, as you know, currently excludes the application site from any development. So my question is, during the process of preparing the local plan in 2000, which was approved in 2017, did Ivan Brook object to the positioning of the development boundary where it is now?
Yeah, I can't confirm whether they made representations as part of that process or not at this meeting. And I think what's important is this is an existing facility in business and obviously needs change over time. And this application is submitted to us at this moment in time where there is additional need for this care, additional care provision to be provided on site. This is an existing employment use or facility, and local plan policies do support expansion and extension of such facilities, even in countryside locations. This is an edge of settlement location and is considered to be appropriate extension of that facility in principle.
Okay, so I'll move into debate. Over to you, Councillor Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm totally opposed to this application, certainly as it stands. I'm sorry this is your first one that you've come to committee to, Adam, but, you know, that's how it is, I'm afraid. We seem to be spending an awful lot of effort in trying to mitigate things about this application that aren't right and aren't fair in the first place, particularly to the local residents. Now, I do appreciate that there is a need for residential care in this area, particularly for dementia patients, but it does seem a bit ironic that the County Council have now agreed to close care homes without any new ones being built. But that's perhaps by the way. So the other thing that always worries me when I read reports is that somewhere in it, I'm sorry, I can't remember which page, it says a window has to be obscure glaze. Now, that says to me that there's innately a problem there if we have to obscure a window. We shouldn't be in the position of having to recommend that, because if it needs obscuring, then there's a problem there. So if I had to give reasons for objecting, there would be overdevelopment, impact on adjacent properties in terms of noise activity, which could be 24 hours a day. It's overbearing, and well, I'll leave it at that. I don't know whether others are going to agree with me, but I'm totally opposed to this, I'm afraid. Well, I'm not afraid, actually.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I will support Sue in, and I feel that this should be refused on the basis that, on a similar sort of basis, that the effect on the amenity of neighbours is huge, and there seems to have been no thought given to the neighbours by the developers or the designers of this scheme. It seems quite straightforward, well, straightforward from the diagram above that's on the screen at the moment. I'm sure it's much more difficult in practice, but to move the building sideways, well away from these houses. It seems a shame that there are two accesses to car parks. That increases the amount of tarmac and makes runoff greater. I can't see that I must admit I have difficulty in understanding how a drainage scheme will will accommodate the runoff from this site, which is going to increase the coverage by quite a lot. Well, must be more than 50% more land covered. And therefore, I feel from a drainage point of view, from amenity of neighbours' point of view, and from an access point of view, this scheme needs to be refused. Now, if it is to be passed, then I would suggest that we need a condition on the road, Limekiln Road, so that Limekiln Lane, so that the remedial work is undertaken there. That the screening is specified in detail concerning the need to preserve privacy and to stop noise and light pollution, and also that the drainage system needs to be thoroughly assessed to ensure that it actually does return runoff rates to greenfield rates. Thank you.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do agree with the mover, Sue and David. I think it should be refused because this has been cited in the wrong place, the dementia centre. I mean, the patients want dignity, they don't want to be heard, but, you know, it's demoralising for the people who's got residents in there to hear shouting and that, which does happen in many cases, because I've evidence of it myself with a relation once. You do need dignity, and this dementia centre has been placed in the wrong place, right against residential areas. You shouldn't do that. You should take it a little distance further back into the site. So this needs refusing, definitely. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, if you would, please, Chris.
Yeah, I'm conscious that I don't think we've got a motion on the table at the moment, but there's been a lot of comments made on why members think the development's unacceptable. I think in terms of the overbearing overshadowing effects, I think we need clarity on that, because for members I'm conscious that some of the members that put that motion on the table, unless they visited the site separately, they weren't in attendance at the site visit yesterday, so we need to understand what those impacts are, because on site, the building's single story in scale, the levels are such that there wouldn't be, in officers' view, significant overbearing overshadowing effects. So we need that to be fully explored in terms of what you mean by those effects. Drainage, for reasons set out by the case officer, I think a refusal on drainage grounds, land drainage grounds and surface water runoff would be unsustainable. We have a drainage strategy for the site, which has been supported by lead local flood authority. So I need to know reasons why you feel that the drainage strategy is unacceptable, so that can be potentially defended at appeal and wouldn't leave the council vulnerable to award of costs for unreasonable behaviour. Access without any objections from the local highway authority, again, we need detailed reasons from you as to why the access arrangements are unacceptable, to not leave the council vulnerable to an award of costs on unreasonable behaviour grounds. Noise, we've discussed that, and we consider that noise impacts can be potentially addressed through conditions, so we need to know why you feel that wouldn't be acceptable, resulting in the need to refuse this application as presented. So I think we need some clarity on the reasons before we go to a vote on any motion for refusal on what's been presented to us so far.
I'll work down my list soon. So, I mean, if you want to think about moving it for refusal, then please work out a few bits of strap lines for us, please, Sue. Councillor O'Brien, put your pen down now, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I have to start off by saying I absolutely agree with Councillor Burfoot. I think it's scandalous that the County Council is in the process of closing care homes in Bakewell, and in fact that New Home Hospital was closed and the residential wards there without any provision being made for patients. But turning to this application, what I think is disappointing from the outset, there was no effort made by the applicants of any discussion with residents prior to submitting a planning application. It's good practice, particularly in sensitive locations like this, that sort of discussion takes place, and that is because it enables, if possible, to reach agreement on designs that are appropriate. I think a lot of the difficulties with this proposal are that there have been no such discussions. I think, in essence, that the development is poor. The proposed development is poor because it's not been thought through. To me, it's what I would call a pattern book proposal, one which has been taken out of a drawer of dementia care homes standards and parachuted down on this site, and parachuted down in a way which is totally inappropriate for the site. I think if this were a housing development, we'd be very quick to say this is overdevelopment. And I think the same principles apply with this proposal. I do think there is a design which could be acceptable. I think if the applicants and their architects and agents are given a clear message by this committee, I think they could come up with an appropriate design. It may involve, for example, utilising the topography of the site to include some two-storey elements, which A, would be more attractive, and B, would very significantly reduce the overall footprint. But that's just my personal opinion. So I would like to move that the application is refused on the basis that the size, scale and massing of the development and the location of the car parking are detrimental to the residential amenities of the locality. Thank you, Chair.
Just to clarify, so the size, scale, massing of the building and location of the associated car parking would result in detrimental effects on the residential amenity of the occupants of nearby dwellings, essentially. If members, officers have expressed a view on those impacts, and we feel that they're acceptable. However, members, that is a valid reason for refusal if members wanted to refuse the application for that reason. Officers don't necessarily agree, but obviously that's for members to decide on where they feel the balance lies on the application. So that is an acceptable reason for refusal in my view, in terms of being reasonably related to the development and having regard to relevant planning policy considerations.
Yeah, happy to second that, Councillor Burfoot. Councillor Buttle.
Well, I was going to second that. I think that's absolutely the case. I don't get the impression that the applicants have made any effort whatsoever to consider the amenity of the lady that's living next to the car park. They could quite easily have created an undercroft and dropped the car park actually under the building. There is just lots of options which they could have taken, which would have avoided distressing the locals, and they've not bothered. I'm going to vote against this. I think they've not proved themselves to have shown any care whatsoever for the local people.
Okay, Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, looking at, I think, in the round, I very much take on board what Councillor Slack is saying, that the building itself, been there for dementia, I totally think it's in the wrong place. I think we've got a duty of care to the residents, and also a duty of care to the people who use it. And I think for that reason I will be supporting the recommendation for refusal.
Sorry to come back again. Just to clarify on the reason for refusal. So what we're saying is the size, scale and massing associated location of the car parking would result in unacceptable, are we saying overbearing, overshadowing effects? Are we saying loss of privacy and noise nuisance? All the four things in this case.
I would add loss of privacy and noise issues.
Yeah, okay.
And light issues potentially.
Are you happy with that, Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Burfoot?
I'm happy that I don't want to make any reference to the fact that it's a dementia unit.
Okay. Right, I've nobody down on my list. It's been moved and seconded for refusal. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So it's been carried, it's been refused. Thank you very much. But being as we've done an hour and a half, we'll take a 10-minute comfort break because I know it's hot. I know Councillor Burfoot will like a bit of a comfort break and some cold water. I'm sure she would. in the rules of debate quite stringently tonight because we've got a long agenda. So if you move into debate and you haven't moved anything, I will not allow you to come back in debate. You have one shot at it. The proposer of a motion is allowed to come back, and the seconder, if they do not wish to speak, has to reserve the right to come back later on in the debate. So this to make it a little bit slicker, we've got 6 more items to do, and I don't propose to be sat here till 12 o'clock tonight, so it's up to you, members. Okay, anyway, moving on. This is item 5.4. This is application number 22/00409 full. 23 Chesterfield Road, Matlock, demolition of existing dwelling erection of building comprising of 15 number apartments, retirement with associated undercroft parking. So I have one speaker for this. I don't know whether he's here. Okay. So, Mr. Oulsman, you have 4 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. The applicant owns a Lilybank 40-bed care home and will offer care service to the residents of the retirement apartments. Consent was granted in 2018 for a 3-storey new building next to the chapel for 8 apartments. Number 23 detached house became available and the client purchased it to increase the number of apartments on the combined sites. Within the pre-planning application we submitted in 2019, it was clear the following was possible. Benefit of providing an improved relationship with the existing chapel, together with frontage onto Chesterfield Road. The removal of number 23 detached 2-storey dwelling would also provide betterment to the street scene in this area. A more modern approach based on the previous approved scheme was considered appropriate. Respect to the topography of the site with a combination of 2 to 3 blocks stepping down to the southwest with a 2-storey part adjacent to the existing dwellings. The beech tree is an important feature, so the new building should be set back to avoid root protection area. Previous applications. The 2 previous applications were based on 3-storey buildings facing Chesterfield Road. Were both withdrawn due to design concerns and heights of the buildings blocking the views of Lilybank building. Current application design approach. The design of the new building has to achieve a number of requirements to work practically as well as aesthetically. Retirement housing in the form of apartments needs to incorporate lift access to all floors and a level walk within each floor of the building. To step the building down 2 or 3 blocks as suggested in the pre-application would not work due to the need for extensive internal ramps between each change in level. Proposal as shown includes for a central lift with each floor providing level access to all apartments. Previous concerns expressed by the planning officers was the 3-storey building blocking views of Lilybank Care Home to the rear of the development site. To address this, we have introduced a flat sedum planted roof between the 2 gable ends, allowing a view over the roof to the Lilybank building. Further guidance would offer to reduce the new building to maximum 2 storeys adjacent to the existing dwellings. We decided to reduce the number of apartments from 21 to 15 to remove the 3rd floor altogether so that the building is only 2-storey facing onto Chesterfield Road and facing the adjoining buildings on both sides. Materials used in the elevation are predominantly natural stonework, blue slate pitch roofs and sash windows to relate to the properties in the area. The central link building is a modern elevation predominantly in glass providing daylight into the communal areas. Overlooking. Building has been reduced to 2-storey facing the neighbours. Balconies are introduced to the front elevations and living areas include screen walls to avoid overlooking the neighbours. Sash windows are in the bedrooms on the side walls facing the chapel at high level and number 21, but with no direct overlooking of windows as the property is 16 metres away and their rear garden is screened by a range of garages. Highways. The parking provision for Lilybank and the 15 apartments has been accepted. The service access has been designed to relate to the existing service access.
30 seconds left.
The beech tree we accept needs to be protected, and we've designed the building in a U-shape to respect that. In summary, we feel that we have explained the design strategy for the proposal for a property using natural, sustainable materials along with modern elements within the design to offer a balanced style of tradition and modern to recognise the design of the moment and not a pastiche of some of the more traditional buildings in the area. The reason behind the design is also...
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyway, there's a little bit of late representation, it's only a couple of lines, so I'll just let you read through that and then we'll move on. Everybody happy? Right, in which case I'll hand over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Members visited the site yesterday to consider the impact of this development on the environment, in particular reasons for refusal number 1 and 2. You'll note from the officer's assessment of this application, also comments made on site, that we feel that the existing or the proposed architecture is restless in this particular case. We have a building that presents itself as being neither contemporary nor traditional. It's a sort of hybrid appearance that we feel is inappropriate to the location. We are in a sensitive environment here in terms of the impact on Matlock Bank Conservation Area. This is a prominent building within the street scene, and as mentioned by the previous speaker, we have engaged in pre-application discussions with the applicants, and we have reiterated the characteristics of this part of the conservation area and the importance of views towards historic buildings within the conservation area. We feel that this design of building is inappropriate to the location for the reasons stated. There is also a secondary reason for refusal, which is the position of the building relative to existing residential properties. We feel that the relationship, and in particular the provision of first floor windows at a high level on the side elevation of the property do result in overlooking at a high level of the rear garden of existing properties, and those impacts are unacceptable to us in planning terms, hence why we've got a second reason for refusal. The third reason for refusal relates to lack of information in relation to available manoeuvring space to be satisfied that vehicles can enter and exit the site in a forward gear to not be prejudicial to highway safety. It's accepted that issue could be potentially overcome through the submission of further information. However, that's not been received to date, hence why that features as a reason for refusal tonight. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Members, over to you. Questions? No? In which case, then I'll move into the debate. Go on then, Sue.
Well, I know this site very well. A member for Matlock will say, I think the officers have got it absolutely right on this one for the reasons that they're giving their recommendation point 8, and for the reasons that they're given for refusal. So I'm happy to put that forward.
So you're happy to move it then, Councillor Burford?
To move it.
Councillor Donnelly?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, when we visited the site yesterday, like Chris has explained and Sue's explained, I was not really impressed with the design or the situation of the building, and I think the officers got totally correct. I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Slack?
Yeah, likewise. I think the officers got this absolutely correct. I think looking at the design, well, it stands out a mile, and looking at it, so I agree with the proposer and second it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack. Anybody else wishing to speak in debate before I go to the vote? No? So it's moved and seconded for refusal. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So that's been refused unanimously. Thank you very much, members. Moving swiftly on. Item 5.5, Darwin, which is application 22/00575 full. Darwin House, Sidmouth Hill, Darley-Moor, Matlock. Retention of change of use of land and buildings to mixed agriculture and equestrian use. I've no speakers registered for this. Are you taking this again, Chris? Okay.
Just to clarify, this item requires planning committee consideration because it's technically a major application due to the size of the application site. And the application is for the the continued use of an existing building on site for equestrian purposes, so as a stable building in part, and also for mixed use of the land for both equestrian and agricultural purposes. It's acceptable use in the countryside, utilising an existing building. There's no associated highway impact, subject to a condition that the use of the facilities on site is for the occupants of the main dwelling only. We're recommending approval of the application on that basis.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions, members? Councillor Donnelly.
Debate.
No, questions first, but if anybody, no questions? In which case I'll move into debate. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was most impressed yesterday when we visited the site. I think, being a horsey person myself, I thought it was absolutely fantastic outlay, so I'm more than happy to move the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Slack.
Yeah, I agree. It's when I saw it, it's ideal site. And
Yep. So you're happy to second it, Councillor Slack?
yeah, but
Councillor Butler, do you wish to speak in debate? No?
Yeah, I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wanted to speak in debate? No? In which case it's been moved and seconded for approval as set out, with the additional condition to make it for private use of the property itself. So all those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? So that's been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, members. Anyway, application 5.6, which is number 22/00610 out, land at Bradbourne Lane, Brassington, outline planning consent for the erection of one dwelling house and removal of existing buildings on site. Now, we have got a few speakers on this. So the first on my list is Mr. Tony Sharp, local resident, speaking in favour of the application. You have 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left. Just need to press the button. That's it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. Yeah, just a little bit of context. I think I've just written down here also. It's a people thing. This is very much a people thing, as we are. Just to give you a tiny bit of context, I'm a retired school teacher, Derbyshire, Woodville, and then I went up to Lee Green. Back in 1993, I arrived in the village of Brassington, still with my family and children, brought up my family and children there. My family's still in the local area as well. My children grew up with Dan Smith, around Dan Smith all of the sort of time. Brassington 1993 was very much a local, very, very local community. It still is, when they say almost run by its own and sort of involved with its own residents. It's still 30 years on, very, very much its own local community. But those definitely are more holiday homes and sort of stuff like that. Sort of definitely second homes as well. What I think really here is the thing is that Dan Smith and his family, who we've known, he's been in the village all of that time, wants to remain in the village. His roots are there. He represents the dyed-in-the-wool Brassington history and its Brassington people. There are those that have and those that have not. What we have here is a young man who wants to spend, who wants his future, wants to bring his family up here. What he wants.
30 seconds left.
As I say, wants to bring his family and future, sees that in Brassington, and I really, really, really support this because there are too many people not doing that these days in our local communities. And I think his future, we've got a chance to ensure that future of Dan and his family continue within that community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That. Thank you.
Right, the next on my list is Mr. Pat Carlin, local resident, to speak for the application. You have 2 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
I'm fully supportive of this application. Dan currently resides with his parents in the centre of the village. Allowing this build would enable him to stay within the village he loves and works in and raise a family. Unfortunately, due to the property prices in the area, young locals are leaving. Prices are mainly driven by second home and rental market, which the locals cannot afford. What we should be doing is supporting and encouraging these young people
to stay in these villages and our local area, plus help them get on the property ladder themselves. Dan is the landowner. He runs his business from this site. The proposal is to build on the existing footprint or area where the barn stands. So technically, it's brown belt. It's got excellent access and parking. It's out of the village, so it would not detract from the historic buildings and properties within the conservation area or the village itself, or add to the traffic or parking problems within it. It would slightly ease due to Dan's vehicles being out of town and not parked outside his parents' properties, which are outside the Miners' Arms and the church steps where we have
30 seconds left.
in the past. The build itself would have minimal effect on the area, barely visible from the roadway. Car parking, etc. would be well out of sight. With all this in mind, I feel that the planning application should be granted, and with it, keep a young local businessman within our village. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, the next on my speak, and welcome to the Planning Committee, Councillor Rose. You have 4 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you. This application...
Would you like to turn your microphone on, please, Janet? That's it.
Start again. This application is unanimously supported by the members of Brassington Parish Council, the residents of Brassington, and myself as ward member. The Smith family have owned the land for 30 years, having previously kept a horse on the land. Dan Smith lives and was brought up in Brassington. He would like to raise a family himself in the village where he works as a volunteer, contributing to village and school life. Dan Smith is a skilled stonemason, as can be seen from the boundary wall surrounding the property. The house would be built by Mr. Smith himself, using locally sourced materials and replace the existing sheds. On the Bradbourne side of the property, there's another house, with more houses towards Brassington. One is set back also. I would consider the application to be infilling. This is not a case of someone wanting to make a quick buck. There are currently over 40 second homes and holiday lets in Brassington, which makes it virtually impossible for a young person to compete within this market. A recently sold 2-bedroom cottage in Brassington sold for £300,000 as a holiday rental. There is no shop and the school has to recruit outside the village. The council's policy of supporting local people in their objective is a key part of the district's policies. Recent retrospective planning was given to the barn conversion, which was hidden for months beneath scaffolding and sheeting to reveal a building twice its original size on the outskirts of the village. There have been several permissions granted locally for new mansions, not homes suitable for young people. There's also the new visitor centre currently being built by Sellers Jewellers on farmland overlooking Carsington Water. Dan Smith has done the right thing, has come properly before this committee, not having a go at building something and applying retrospectively. This should be commended, and critically, we must not give the impression that you are in with a better chance if you ignore the proper processes. Planning policies clearly allow for this kind of development. Whilst ever the council has not provided a 5-year supply of housing sites, as is the case now, it should apply its housing policies with flexibility and be prepared to allow development in sustainable locations like this. The message a refusal would send out to young people who we make so many warm, supportive noises about in our overall council policies would be highly detrimental. Young people are the lifeblood of our villages. Please support Dan Smith on this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rose. So now, Councillor Fitzherbert was going to be with us tonight, but unfortunately is not. So on his behalf, Tommy from committees has got to read a statement out from Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chair.
As members will know, I, as neighbouring ward member, took on responsibility for many planning applications in the Carsington ward as a result of the absence of the late Councillor Rose. This application was one that I took a great deal of interest in, and I trust that you will value my view that it is essential that we let local youngsters stay in local accommodation, especially when their talent and career is in local work, namely as a successful stonemason. Added to that, the applicant intends to build and restore the property himself. I note the officer's reasoning for refusal, but I would argue that this application is exactly what this committee is there for, i.e. to support local people. I suggest that the committee should seriously consider the principle of development here, that this is to positively assist local people. There is very little problem with highway access and egress. There would be a positive impact on residential amenity, and I feel that this would be a positive contribution not just to the village but to the community of Brassington. The Parish Council has supported Daniel's application, as have many others in the community. I urge the committee to support this application and approve it.
Okay, thank you very much. The last on my list is Mr. Daniel Smith, the applicant himself, to speak. You have 4 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. You just need to press the button. That's it.
Hello, committee members. I'm asking for your support for my planning application. I've been a resident of Brassington Village all my life and was raised here and class myself as a true local. As you can see from the application, the proposed dwelling is situated on a small piece of land on an infilling plot between houses on the edge of the village, directly opposite the village allotments. The land has been in the family for nearly 40 years, and I've used it as a base to operate my stone masonry and dry stone walling business and hold a small amount of livestock. Most of my work is carried out in the village and the local surrounding area, and I would like to think this has a positive impact, as there are getting less and less people in the craft of dry stone walling. My idea to live and work all on one site would benefit me massively, reduce my need to travel, help my business progress in the future, and keep supporting the local area. The proposed footprint of the new dwelling would be sited on already existing buildings, so there will be no extra visual impact on the area, and it cannot be well seen from the road, and it would tidy the site up. The plan would be to do a self-build using natural limestone and local materials which will be sympathetic to the local area and in keeping with the surrounding dwellings. As the council hasn't got a 5-year supply of housing sites, it is surely reasonable to suggest that the rather restrictive housing policies in your local plan should not be used to prevent sensible proposals like mine for new houses on the edge of villages, particularly when the applicant is a local person. In Brassington alone, we have more than 40 holiday cottages, making it harder for young people to remain. I noted recently that the work has started to build the Sellers Jewellers development on open land next to Carsington Reservoir, which was previously greenbelt farming land. And on balance, I would like to think my site, with existing buildings and footprint in Brassington, would be more suitable. I also think it's worth mentioning I have the full support of my local parish council, to which some members and a local resident have written extra personal letters of support. I would like to ask if you could take this into account when making your decision. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. There is no late reps on this, so I'll hand over to the officer. Adam, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline application for the erection of one dwelling on the site with all matters reserved. We looked at this site yesterday and walked up to the buildings. The key issue essentially is the principle of residential development on this site and whether or not that is justified in this case. And there's also a sort of a side issue on the impact on the character and appearance of the area. It's just worth noting that the District Council did refuse an outline planning application for a dwelling on this site and a stonemason workshop in 2021, and that is a material consideration. Officers consider the site in open countryside and beyond the edge of Brassington, which is a Tier 4 settlement. As has been said, the applicant is a local person with strong local connections who wishes to remain in the village. However, officers' recommendation is that there isn't any provision in policy for the erection of a market dwelling on this site, which is beyond the edge of Brassington, and the application does not demonstrate that a dwelling is required to meet the essential need of a rural enterprise. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members' questions. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one question. Isn't in the policy in the local plan there is a policy about self-build, but that's not mentioned in this report. Why isn't that mentioned in this report? Because that would be a positive element in favour of this development, and I see it rather partial. This makes the evaluation of the rather partial, because it's not taking into consideration positive elements for this planning application, only the negative ones from the local plan.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. My understanding of self-build housing is that as an authority where we have demand for self-build properties and land for self-build properties, we have to allocate that in the plan, or we have to maintain a register of persons that wish to construct self-build properties. The applicant would have had to have identified himself on that register, and his application would have been submitted on that basis, that this would provide a site for a self-build property. That's not what's been presented to us as part of this application, so it's not material to the assessment of this application.
Chair, if I can come back, I would, first of all, I would say that by asking for outline planning permission, he is very much doing that. He's saying, can we put this site forward for self-build? And secondly, that's a rather legalistic way of looking at the policy, and surely the reason for that register of self-build is to encourage people to self-build, and we should be looking at what we really want to do, and that's to achieve self-build, not just provide. We don't just want to provide a register. We want to make people. We want to allow people to build for themselves.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, just coming back on that, this gets to the essence of what planning really is all about. Self-build housing in the open countryside is not a sustainable form of development. If we were to allocate sites or identify sites for self-build houses, they would need to be in appropriate locations. Our position here is that this is a lower order settlement outside of the settlement, the built framework of the settlement, and is therefore a relatively unsustainable form of development unless there are special circumstances for why a dwelling needs to be located in its location. So I think we just need to have regard to that, the principle and the appropriateness of residential development in this location. I don't think we can set that aside.
Okay. Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If this were a planning application for an affordable home on the basis that this is a rural exception site, and the applicant demonstrated that they met the local occupancy criteria and other affordable housing criteria, can you confirm that it's likely that the recommendation would be for an approval?
So for this to be accepted as an exception site, there would have to be a local needs assessment carried out. And if this was considered to be suitable, I mean, one of the considerations is, is there a need for affordable housing in Brassington at this time? And then we have to consider the appropriateness of developing this particular site in terms of its impact on the character and the existing settlement pattern, conservation area and everything else. If this was promoted as an affordable housing scheme, then any future occupant would be someone that was identified as a person in need. So someone, for example, that's registered on home options, and there may be someone else that's in greater affordable housing need than the applicant. There'd be no guarantee that ultimately they would be able to live in the property if it was delivered as a affordable unit that was for local people based on need at that time.
Okay.
Can I just sort of go? My question is to confirm that if it were a rural exception site, then the criteria relating to being within the settlement boundary no longer strictly apply. That is the case with a rural exception site.
Just to clarify on that point, this is a tier 4 settlement, so there is no settlement framework boundary. So policy is only supportive of development that comprises acceptable infill and consolidation. We may allow edge of settlement sites for rural exception housing. However, as set out in the officer's report, this is 2 fields removed from the settlement. We don't consider it to be appropriate infill consolidation or edge of settlement development in this case.
Okay. Councillor Furness.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is to do with the village envelope. I wasn't at the site visit. Can you tell me how far it is from the village envelope, please? I know you said 2 fields, but can you give me a distance?
It's quite. This plan probably indicates it as best as we can probably show in the presentation. But you can see the site there hatched pink and edged sort of pink. So you've got existing buildings on the site itself. You've got a building to the west, and what you just can't see there. Well, you see the far east. You've got an access to what's property known, I think, as Hipley Barn. So that comprises the start, in my view, of the settlement. So it just gives you an idea as to proximity of this site to the settlement.
So you can't give me a distance?
We can, yeah. I can give you a distance if you like. We can scale it off the plan. Yep, I'll do that now.
Thanks.
We've not got the appropriate scale on a rule, but we'll try and work it out.
Okay.
We'll work it out for you. So we're looking at a distance between the site and the garage to Hipley Barn of 110 metres.
Okay, a fair distance. So the second question is, could this be an exception site for affordable housing on a private basis? We do this at Peacock, I'm not sure it happens here, not being a regular member.
Yeah, in my view, I think it's a site that's too far removed from the existing built framework to be an acceptable exception site, in my opinion. But it's not promoted as that, and it's a different policy assessment to an application for what is essentially a market dwelling on the site.
So is the applicant already living in a house that he owns, or is he renting?
Yeah, I can't confirm that position, although there is something in the report that I read that I think it's paragraph 7.5, the applicant has lived in Braston for 36 years and he wishes to remain in the village. His work is mainly located in the area, and he travels to and from the site frequently most days. But it's unclear, I think, from the assessment as to whether he currently lives in the village. I'm assuming he does, and he lives in close proximity to the site because that's where he operates his business from. I can't confirm that.
I think it was alluded to that he lived with his mother in the village, Chris.
Okay.
I think that's correct, is it
Okay,
not?
so you didn't tell the house where it is?
No.
Yeah.
As far as I have.
Thank you.
Councillor Burful.
Thank you. I'm a bit confused, if you like. I'd like to know what the reasons are why stone masonry, if that's the right word, is not considered a rural-based enterprise, as I would assume a lot of the work is to do with dry stone walling in an area like this.
Yeah, it is a rural-based enterprise, but the test to approve a permanent dwelling is that rural enterprise has to have an essential functional need for someone to live on site. So this is brought up on site, but that's normally associated with a farm. It's got a need for someone to be on site for livestock, but it can be other purposes. So, for example, if someone breeds horses and they're valuable animals, or another example I'm aware of is where you make coking coal and you need to be on site, to manage that potentially dangerous process. But you have to be on site related to actually what that particular business does, which we don't think that would apply for a stonemason business.
You happy with that, Councillor Burford? Councillor Buttle? And then you after Peter.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions. The first is about housing targets. Both, at least two speakers anyway, spoke about our lack of designated areas, designated housing, what have you. So if this was built, would this actually take one off what we are failing to meet? Second question was, when we went there, I didn't see what that small building was on the other side of the wall from where the structures are that are going to be removed, and I'm curious as to what that was. And while I'm at it, I think I'll make a comment about the fact that villages don't really have natural solid boundaries. They tend to be scattered into the landscape. And I have to say, this does feel to me like a place which might have a scattered home. This is where somebody may well have had a thing, and it feels like a natural flow. So I'm certainly a bit unsure.
Yeah, in terms of the outbuilding, I believe that is an outbuilding to Ash Cottage. We didn't quite look at it on site, but if you can see Ash Cottage sort of, it's on the road. I think those outbuildings are part of that property.
And it's not being used as somebody's workplace or anything like that. It's not their garden office or anything like that.
I'm not sure of the precise use. It's not mentioned in the report.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Can I just come back on the first
Yeah,
question? Just addressing the first question, Councillor Bottle. In answer to the question, yes, it would make a very modest contribution towards our housing needs, but there are specific provisions in the plan, and it's important that housing delivery is plan-led, and we locate all development in appropriate locations. The plan makes provision where we haven't got a 5-year housing land supply for consideration on the sites of higher order settlements, so tier 1 to 3 settlements. So there are provisions in place, and we are currently reviewing the local plan to meet our aspirations for economic growth and recovery, which will hopefully identify further suitable sites for housing development.
Okay. Councillor Slack?
Are we into debate now?
Not yet, Peter.
My question's debate, really.
You want to move into debate?
Yeah.
Well, I've got nobody else down on my list, so go for it.
Right, thank you. This gentleman's property there is his workplace. He's got all his materials there. It's everything there on site. It is his place of work, and he should be operating. He should be allowed to have a property there, in my opinion, definitely, because he's got to look after all his equipment, his stone equipment and so forth, and work there, and his vehicles and so forth. This is a very difficult one because Brassington hasn't a settlement boundary, truly hasn't a settlement boundary. So, as Neil already stated, it's a scattered area where this should be allowed in a scattered area in certain circumstances, such as this, where this gentleman's is a local man, he's trying to do the best he can, and you're looking at a village there with 40 second homes there, owned by people coming in and taking over the village. We've got to, this is special circumstances here where we've got to really look at it seriously and say, you know, this young man is hardworking, he's a local lad, and he should be allowed to progress in this area. It's not going to build a mansion, it's just going to have a property to live in. So I'm against officer's recommendation on this.
So are you wanting to move it for approval, Councillor Slack?
I am, yes, Chair.
Okay, then. I'll go with Sue. It's been second. It's been moved. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support the proposal, but I'm going to suggest 2 very specific conditions would be associated with it. I'll come on to those in a moment. I agree with what others have said, that there's a sort of idealised perception of what English and Derbyshire Dales villages are. You know, it's a sort of Thomas Hardy view that everything is nicely arranged around a picturesque village green. The reality isn't like that generally. It certainly isn't like that in Brassington. So I think we have to get real about our villages. And I think, again, as others have said, we often talk in the council about the need to support our local communities and to enable working families to continue to live and work locally. But as well as talking about it, we actually have to do something about it, and we have to see whatever mechanisms we have, and planning is one of them, to enable that talk to be more than just talk. And I think this is an opportunity which we have to do that. I'm quite satisfied that a stonemason is a rural enterprise. I'm quite satisfied in my own mind. I'm quite satisfied in my own mind that the location is within what I would broadly call Brassington Village. I'm quite satisfied about that. What I do think it's essential that if an application like this is approved, we recognise that approval goes with the land, goes with the site. It doesn't go with the applicant. And if we simply approved it, its value would be immense. Let's put it that way. It would have a very high value. And what actually we want is this dwelling to be occupied with someone who's engaged in a local enterprise and who lives locally. So in approving it, what I would ask is that we have two conditions. One is that it is restricted in perpetuity to an individual or family unit whose main income is a rural enterprise, and that the occupants in perpetuity can demonstrate a local connection to Brassington or neighbouring villages. That is a way that not only enables us to support this particular application, but it ensures that in future the property remains available to a genuine local enterprise and an individual or family that lives locally. So I would ask that the mover and seconder would be prepared to add those two specific conditions to their proposal for approval.
Chris, would you not like to just come back on that?
Yeah, I think if members were minded to approve this application, I think we have to assess it on an as-submitted basis. It's not presented as a local occupancy property, and there's no policy basis upon which to restrict the property in that manner. So in planning terms, any conditions would be considered to be unnecessary and unreasonable. It wouldn't pass the test that would have to be applied. So I think members just need to think about that and what the policy basis would be for applying the condition in this particular case.
Councillor Slack.
Could I, as a point of information, come back, Chair, then while I referred to a condition, would you agree it could equally well be by way of a Section 106 agreement?
Again, it has to be reasonably necessary in planning terms, and there's no policy basis for asking for it based on what has been submitted. In my view, I mean, you don't have to listen to officers' view, but that's my professional view.
Councillor Slack.
Yeah, I take on board Councillor O'Brien's proposals, and I agree with a rural enterprise, but 106 wouldn't work. So I do agree with his views on the others, and make it a condition that this property is always occupied with somebody in rural enterprise work. So yeah, I do agree with what Councillor O'Brien said, apart from 106.
Well, I think Chris set it out that we can't condition it. It's
No.
unreasonable. So
Yeah.
So we'll just have to go with the approval. Yeah. So you don't want to. What Chris has suggested is not to accept those additional conditions because they wouldn't be workable, Peter.
Well, I think we would personally. Then I've got it wrong. Then, if Councillor O'Brien's referring to that, yeah, I agree with Councillor O'Brien. Yeah, I disagree with planning officer.
Chris.
And that one.
I think as members, what you'd have to do is craft an argument that you felt there was sufficient justification here to demonstrate exceptional circumstances for a rural worker. You could impose the condition on that basis, but my professional view is it's not necessary. It doesn't pass the test for condition, so it wouldn't be an appropriate condition. However, members felt that it was necessary for it to be acceptable to them in policy terms. If they felt there was an essential need for a rural worker, then that's within their gift, isn't it, in supporting the application.
Entirely up to, it's open to you, Peter.
Yeah, no, I still disagree. It should, we can't really rule this out, really, because on them grounds, really, it's not an essential worker. Of course he is. He's doing a rural enterprise, which is very, very scarce in this area. So he needs support, and I think everybody will totally agree with that, really. And the special circumstances here, Chris, apply.
What you've got to be mindful of here is if you impose a condition that the property shall be occupied by a person with an essential need to live on site, that the applicant themselves might not comply with the condition because we don't consider there is a functional essential need for that particular individual to be in that property. So I would argue that it's inappropriate really in that respect, and it's not. I just don't think it's an acceptable condition.
Well, it applies everywhere, isn't it? The essential workers. If somebody leaves that property, it's got to be another essential worker similar to come into that property. So that's what we're saying. It's got to be essential worker in rural trades.
Councillor Burfoot, I know you second the proposal. Are you happy with that?
No, I actually agree with the officers on this.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that condition. No, I think. Do you want me to say my?
Yes.
What I want
Carry
to
on.
say? So, I mean, I think we've got to judge this application on its merits as it's put to us in the application, and I, for one, am prepared to accept that this applicant is genuine and intends to use it as his family home. I'm prepared to accept that. I think certainly as a council and a planning committee, we should be looking at villages with dwellings that are primary residences to ensure the viability of the village, so to keep the school open. And I mean, I know there's no shops in Brassington, but there is a school, and you know, I'd like to think that village retains its viability, and I think we need to support local people who want to remain in their own villages, so that, you know, it doesn't become a village full of holiday lets and, dare I say, old people who can afford to live there. So, again, I'm afraid I'm against the officer recommendation. I think this is a perfectly acceptable proposal. I think Brassington is a typical limestone village, and we've got villages like that throughout the Peak Park, and some of us are saying constantly that the Peak Park should be approving more properties, whether, you know, and here we're saying the opposite, so it doesn't make sense to me. I haven't got a problem with this application.
So you're happy to second for approval, but not with the conditions that Councillor Slack. So, Councillor Slack, I'm afraid we're at a bit of an impasse unless you pull it out.
Yeah, the opinion is of most councillors. Sue just said. Yeah, definitely.
Okay then, so that's without those two conditions. What I'm conscious of is now we're getting to 8:30, so I'll move an extension of half an hour. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Anyway, getting back to the list, Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I was going to second it, and I can go what the proposal in the seconder says. I think it is essential that Mr. Smith remains in the area. I think stonemasonry is essential in Derbyshire and all over the place, and really, I'm sure it'll never be out of work, that's for sure. So I'm happy to support the application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Froggatt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I fully support everything that Councillor Burfoot's just said.
You're down on the list, Councillor Finesse,
we
don't
have a
worry.
young family, locally born and bred, that want to stay in the village. there seems to be some assumption that they're going to build it, live in it for a few years and sell it on, but they have a young family. That house will be for that family for the future, not to go onto the open market. You know, that they will want to keep that, keep the business running. And let's face it, we have got to support dry stone wallers, stonemasons, because it is a dying art. And we are in an area of dry stone walls. So I fully support approval of this application. So that's me.
Thank you very much. It's your turn now, Councillor Finesse.
Thank you, Chair. To me, there is a clear personal need. You know, this young man does need this house, and he is local. You know, so he would apply. He would be suitable for it. I think personally there needs to be a 106. And if you're saying, Chris, that you can't put 106 in on this application, then I think we should defer it until such time that you can put it on 106, that the applicant agrees to 106. Because, you know, this house needs to be, once it's been built, kept for local people in the future.
Anyway, thank you very much. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's a bit of a no-brainer, this. I think we should, I'm not going to go into the reasons because they've already been said dozens of times. But I think we should support this applicant and approve this application. So I'm fully behind him.
Thank you very much, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, Chair, I'm fully in support of this. I think somebody said, one of the speakers said, it's a people thing, and it is a people thing. Villages aren't only bricks and mortar, they're communities. They spread slightly outside the village, as Councillor Slack said. So what? This will help develop the community and maintain the community in Brassington. It'll make it stronger. A new family in Brassington, or family staying in Brassington, using the excellent local school, which my two nieces go to from Wirksworth, because there are plenty of places in Brassington, but not necessarily local to where they're living. So yes, I'm fully in support of this application.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Buttle.
This is almost a question, I'm sorry. I should have asked this earlier.
Probably.
I'll be swift.
Please.
There's a diagram with a picture of the house. Does the applicant have to work with that diagram and that layout, or are they allowed to be more adventurous in the longer term once they have worked out and found out that this is a site that could work for them?
Okay, well, I think Chris wants to come back because we do need to think about conditions on this application. So I think Chris will cover that, what you've just said, and a few conditions may be suggested.
Yeah, just coming back to the suggestion of the Section 106 agreement, I think from listening to the debate and discussion, I think what members are saying is that having regard to the unique circumstances of the applicant, their local connection to the area and the location of their business and contribution to the rural area or economy, however you want to frame it, is such that a dwelling on this site would be acceptable in accordance with development plan policy. I think if you're making that assessment, although it's a bit tenuous in terms of link to policy, I think if the basis of your decision is on that local connection, although there's no policy basis, I think an argument, albeit a weak argument, could be made that future occupants of the property could be could be persons that have that same local connection. I think it's dodgy territory in terms of whether it passes the tests of conditions, but I think you could make that potential link. I'd be more concerned about a condition that restricted occupancy to an essential rural worker, because I'd be concerned that the applicant themselves wouldn't meet that criteria, if that makes sense. And we also need to think about conditions if you were minded to approve the application. So it's submitted in outline, so we need an application or condition to secure all the approval reserve matters, any necessary highway conditions, at the very least, I'd suggest in this case.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Slack and Councillor Burfoot?
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Councillor Burfoot, yeah? Okay.
And can it please clarify, would you want to impose a local occupancy condition? Or are we happy without that,
We
that
can
condition?
forego that, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
thank you very much. Anyway, it's been moved and seconded with approval as set out.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarification? You're proposing it's moved with a local occupancy condition of some sort?
Well, I think having regard to the debate and what you were suggesting, I think it's reflecting on that again. So having regard to the unique circumstance of the applicant, their local connection, which is a key part of your decision, isn't it? And their contribution, or the location of their business and contribution to the local area or rural economy is such that you feel that development is appropriate in this case. And having come to that conclusion, I think you could make a case that the base of your decision was in a large part because of the local connection, and therefore you felt that condition was reasonable and necessary. So you could make that link. I think I'd be more concerned about a condition about the occupancy being restricted to an essential rural worker.
Yep.
Chair, I'm not sure the applicant's going to be following all this, because I'm
No,
not.
probably not, no. So it's been moved and seconded.
Could we just clarify, so if we did impose, just to go even further, if we did impose some form of occupancy restriction...
I'm taking it Councillor Slack and Councillor Burfoot don't want to impose any
No,
occupancy.
no, I don't
So,
want to
so in
impose
which case then the substantive motion still stands with the conditions as set out by Chris. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Furness, I'm going to the vote. So it's been moved for approval as set out by Councillor Slack and Councillor Burfoot with the added conditions from Chris. So all those in favour of approval, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So that's been carried, it's been approved. Good luck, Mr. Smith. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Application number 5.7, 22/00616 full, White Bean Cottage, Hillside Lane, Brassington. We have quite a number of speakers on this. So anyway, we'll start off with the first speaker, Mr. Philip Johnson, local resident, to speak against the application. You have 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I'm Philip Johnson, so I'm the next door neighbour to White Beams Cottage. It's factual that the property is currently used as a holiday rental business. There's been plenty of evidence of disturbances in the past, one of which was Sunday night, they're a result of it being used as a holiday rental. If it's used as a dwelling house or a family home, minor disturbances wouldn't be an issue and likely infrequent. But ongoing disturbances by transient and often inconsiderate groups of visitors of this nature mean it's arguably not a dwelling house and is potentially a place of assembly. I've consulted this with a consultant, and the recommendation to approve the conditions, in his words, is an absolute nonsense. He recommends that the planners should consider its use prior to proceeding to assessment of its material merit. It's already established the fact that it is a holiday rental business, and the increasing size is therefore arguable whether its current state or planned state is a change of use. Recent cases in Oxford Council and East Sussex Council have proven this precedent. Second point I'd like to make is about highways. It seems that no assessment has been done by highways of the likelihood of increased cars from the increased capacity of this business. It's again factual that there is already parking issues, and further increasing capacities of the business would exacerbate safety and parking concerns on an already congested area, irrespective of the controls mentioned. The transient nature and the use
30 seconds left.
mean that the roads and use the roads in any way they please. Again, I feel this is about people, peace and quiet of the village, and ultimately not creating a rambling party house, either in this ownership or the next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next on my list is Mrs. Judith Ward, local resident, speaking against the application. You have 2 minutes, and similarly, I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. No, you'll have to turn it back on. You've turned it off, don't.
My name is Judith Ward, a resident of Brassington for 31 years, and I live at Style House, neighbour to White Bean Cottage, an holiday rental for 8 occupants. I did not object to the original planning application for the building of White Beam Cottage, as I believed it was a residential dwelling and parking for 2 cars and a garage. This is not the case no longer. Since White Beam Cottage was purchased, it has operated as a holiday rental by absentee owners. The change of the use of White Beam Cottage from residential to holiday rental is a negative impact on my quality of life. What was used to be quite residential area, not anymore due to excessive noise, traffic, parking and other issues. I strongly object to the planning application because of this would certainly cause more problems in this residential area. May I ask you please to refuse this planning application for these reasons? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very succinct. Next on my list is Mr. Pat Carlin, local resident, to speak against the application. You have 2 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left. Just need to turn the microphone on.
I fully understand the decisions that you make as a council, and you can't please everyone. But I'm hoping in this case you take into the account the immediate local residents who are objecting to the proposal on the grounds that this isn't a normal holiday house, it's a party house. There are 11 residential homes in close proximity to White Beam, 8 of which are occupied by retired locals who have lived in these homes all or most of their lives. They deserve to live their lives as they intended in their later years and not be surrounded by noise, parking issues and sometimes verbal abuse. On occasions, guests park illegally on neighbouring land or block the access road for emergency and local residents. The original planning application, one of the things it stated was this obscure glass in the 2 windows when it was residential. When it changed hands and went to a rental, these windows were changed to clear glass, which overlooked the neighbours. Plus, the car parking
30 seconds left.
offer and extends to 4 or 5 vehicles. Occupancy at the present is also well into double figures at times. The current rule is 8 maximum. By allowing this application to go ahead, it would have further serious effects on the local elderly residents and the quality of life, plus cause more traffic and noise concerns to everyone in the area. It would technically turn this property into a full
Thank you very much.
bedroom.
Your time's up. Sorry.
No problem.
Right. The next on my list is Mrs. Annie Haig, local resident, but she's not here, so I'm going to have her representation read out by the committees.
Thank you, Chair. The owner of the property operates it as a business, a holiday rental for 8 occupants, and has applied for planning permission to extend the property with the loss/incorporation of the garage area to increase occupancy, less mobile accommodation. Coincidentally, the applicant has purchased a larger holiday rental business and recently submitted a similar planning application with limited mobility accommodation to also extend the holiday complex. This was the Knoll Hartington under Hartington Holiday Cottages to also maximise occupancy. Please may I ask the Planning Committee to take into consideration that this application is submitted from a business and absentee owner and not as a resident. I did not object to the original application and have not had any problem with this property until it was purchased and the change of use by the current owners. As a long-term resident of the village for 50 years, whose property on Hillside Lane, a narrow single-track lane without pavement and limited parking / passing / turning, which is regularly damaged by the increased volume of vehicles, I object to this planning application. This traffic and highway safety issue is not helped by the existing insufficient off-road parking and the current use of the garage as a games room by White Beam Holiday Rental for 8 occupants. My objections to this planning application concerns parking and highway safety, and may I please ask you to consider placing a restriction on the quantity of vehicles as recommended by DCC Highways that can be parked off-road. That includes the loss of garage building used for the storage of a vehicle, currently advertised and used as a
30
game
seconds
room.
left.
When utilising this large holiday rental to protect the character and buildings in this quiet conservation area, PD1 adverse impact adopted Derbyshire Dales Local Plan 2017. Why has the applicant not stated that the existing number of vehicles parked off-road on any of the planning documents forms submitted, should the quantity of vehicles be an important consideration, especially in a congested area? The original planning application in 2006
Thank you
stated
very
2
much,
vehicles.
Tommy. That's 2 minutes. Right, the next on my list is Councillor Janet Rose, ward member. You have 4 minutes, Councillor Rose, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Brassington Parish Council unanimously object to this application, as I do as ward member. Numerous letters of objection have been sent to the District Council, together with numerous complaints regarding noise and congestion. These have been recorded by the Council. The application is for a 2-storey extension. Planning permission was granted in 2004 for a house and garage and parking for 2 cars. There are over 40 holiday/second homes in Brassington, as I'm sure you now know. There is no highways report to accompany the planning papers. More attention is given to the hornbeam tree than the neighbours' parking and noise concerns. There have been 20 recorded incidents where properties and cars have been damaged recently, and regularly there are 4 to 5 parked cars at this property. Cars reverse onto the drive opposite to exit. This property should be in a D class, place of assembly, and not C3, a private dwelling house. Whitebeam Cottage is situated on Hillside Lane, an extremely narrow lane with poor parking. The area is extremely built up. The revised layout states that the number of occupants would remain the same for eight persons, and that the study could be a bedroom. Well, of course it will. And the property will accommodate 10. The cottage is almost touching the next door property. This is not in the isolated countryside. Tonight's officer's report states, 7.5, the property development does not propose to increase the number of occupants and that the existing parking provision is adequate. 7.7, it is considered the property development would not lead to an unacceptable impact on residential amenity of the neighbouring residents. Well, the residents would consider this untrue. I will sum up using the words of one of the residents who is a neighbour. There is no valid reason for this extension. It would merely increase revenue for the owners who live outside the area as a party house, who do not have to put up with the inconvenience Brassington residents have to tolerate. I ask you to reject this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rose.
Thank you.
The last on my list is Miss Rachel Summerfield, the applicant to speak in favour of the application. You have 4 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Summerfield, owner of Whitebeam Cottage. This is a planning application for a small side extension in local materials. The complaints that have been made are about the strength of feeling of local villagers to holiday cottages, which is well known across England and understandable, rather than the extension. Our building plans should improve this, as we will spend more time there, have less weeks a year with paying guests, more parking, and the same number of beds and bedrooms as the existing property. Our situation is somewhat different to an average holiday cottage. Our intention since our purchase in 2016 has been to spend a lot of time in Brassington. As we have less work commitments, we're planning to significantly increase the already 10 weeks a year that we spend there and to stop renting it out eventually once we retire. We do what we can to contribute to village life, as we want to feel a part of it and help out. We have participated and led the supper quizzes at the Gate Inn. We're on the local magazine committee, the Brass and Banter, publishing several articles and led guided walks from the village. We're regulars in the 2 village pubs and support many of the village's charitable endeavours. The cottage currently sleeps 8. We have 4 double bedrooms, and this will not change. We're happy to have a condition that we will only market for a maximum 8 guests. What we are planning is a study so that my husband can work from home, which means we can spend more time there, more bathroom facilities for when we stay with our 3 kids and their partners, an additional parking space as residents have asked for this. We're happy for neighbours to signpost as private parking areas with ambiguous status to make it easier for visitors to know where not to park, and we're happy to limit parking numbers on site. We are aware that holiday cottages are not popular, and we've taken the following measures to help ease any issues. We only use a reputable marketing company, holidaycottages.co.uk, with a local representative who does not allow our venue to host single-sex young groups and is clear about 8 guests maximum. Guests tend to be family reunions and young families. Brassington does not attract parties because it's so quiet. On our marketing website, it states, "Cottage situated in a quiet residential village, please be mindful of noise after 9 o'clock." This is signposted in our front and back windows, in the garage, and a handwritten welcome letter which asks the guests to be mindful of noise after 9. We've been recommended that a hot tub would increase revenue by up to 40%. We've refused to do this as we know it would increase noise in the back garden, and we've not wanted to upset neighbours any further. We have 2 Brassington residents who are on hand for guests if any issues arise and who manage the properties. We receive guests all year round, so this is permanent local employment for them, and the pubs welcome our guests very regularly, helping to sustain the 2 village pubs. No windows were changed as far as I know, and if they were, we'll change them back, and we've never had a complaint about damaged cars. We did speak to Derbyshire Dales Council post-lockdown after receiving a neighbour and some guest complaints, and
30 seconds left.
They said we've been very amenable, and 11 o'clock is the required time of quiet. This is somewhere we want to spend more and more time, and we've tried to be responsive to neighbours' requests, such as adding parking, liaising with guests as soon as possible if there is an issue, and tending to neighbours' tree concerns. We did invite our local neighbours in for a drink, and in years to come, we hope that perhaps we will be invited back. Thank you. We ask you to approve it for our use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, there's some late reps, so I'll let you read the reps before we move on. Okay, members? Happy? Yeah. Before I do, I'll move another extension from 9 till 9:30. Need a seconder for it. All those in favour, please show. So the extension's been carried. Anyway, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points that I just need to come back on following speakers on this item. In the late representation sheet, you can see the officer response to the late representations that were received, and also comments that were made on site yesterday about the use of the existing building. And as set out to members, the use of the property as a party house could amount to a material change in the character of the lawful use of the building as a dwelling house, and that includes both use of the property as a main residence, but also as a holiday let. It's very much a case of fact and degree in terms of how that building's being used. If, for example, you had 10 people unconnected to one another visiting the site to holiday together, you could argue, well, that's not within the spirit of the C3 use classification. There's various case law on that. That would amount to a material change in the character of the lawful use of that building. So in that scenario, you would invite an application because you'd be moving from a lawful C3 dwelling house use to a sui generis use. That's not the case here, in that although we are conscious of some of the comments that have been made that the property may have been used as a party house by persons not living together as one household. However, that in itself would be a breach of planning control, and we'd have control over that type of usage. What we're presented with here is an application to extend the existing property under a householder application for continuous use of the building as a single dwelling house, whether that's used as main residence or holiday let use. As an extension to that building, we feel that it's acceptable in terms of its impact on the character and appearance of the property. It sits within the conservation area. Our own conservation design officers looked at the application, considers the extension to be acceptable. The property, albeit will be extended, will retain 4 bedrooms, albeit some of the accommodation could also be utilised for bedrooms. However, for a 4-bedroom property, a dwelling of that size would warrant at least 3 off-street parking spaces to meet the space standards set out in a local plan. Members that visited the site will have noted that there is space for 3 off-street parking spaces in this particular case. So we feel that the development is acceptable in terms of an extension to the existing property and the impact on the conservation area, but also from a parking and highway safety perspective. Holiday let use in highway safety terms is considered to be generally a less intensive use than a main residence use. We're happy to recommend, well, we've recommended approval of the application on that basis, and happy to take questions at this stage.
Thank you, Chair. You've partially answered my first question, I think, on what change there is in the class of use. So I won't pursue that one any further. I'm intrigued by whether or not it's the issue of on-street parking as well as off-street parking. The on-street parking leading to more congestion. Should that be taken into consideration? We know that the on-street parking is a result of its use as holiday let, but it is being used as a holiday let, and it is resulting in on-street parking, which is causing congestion, and therefore it would seem to be something which is a material planning consideration. Am I right in assuming that?
It is. Acceptable parking provision is a material consideration, and put pressure that insufficient provision would place on street parking and the implications that could have on highway safety is an important consideration. However, based on the size of this particular property, our criteria or our policy for parking spaces is to require 3 spaces for a dwelling of this size. So that does constitute appropriate provision for the use of the building as a dwelling house, whether used as a main residence or holiday let use. You would expect that would provide sufficient provision for the use of that property within that use classification.
Okay. Councillor Burfield.
Thank you, Chair. I've only got 2 questions. I noticed in the report, I always notice when it says on the recommendation on balance, So could the officer just explain to me what he means by on balance? What are the pros and cons as he sees it? And the second question is about the impact on highway. So I can't see anything in the report from DCC Highways. Do we know why that is?
Yeah, this is an application that was sent to Heat and Planning, who provide make recommendations to us on some of our householder applications. It is terminology and language that they tend to use on most of their reports to us. But I think, having read the report, they're clear in that the development is fully compliant with local plan policy. They've considered the requirements of policy HC10 and PD1, which requires development to be served by appropriate level of parking. They've had regard to the space standards in our plan. They've considered it to be acceptable in that respect, without the need for formal consultation with the local highway authority. Yeah, I think it's just language really, and writing style of Heat and Planning. You tend to find that on all their reports, it's on balance.
I think Councillor Burford's a bit sceptical about that, but anyway.
I have got another question,
go for it,
actually,
Sue.
if you don't mind. So, given that we know that this is a holiday let, I've listened to what the applicant has said, but it is clearly a holiday let, even though it's used by the family, I think she said up to 10 weeks a year. But is quiet enjoyment of someone's property, is that a material planning consideration?
The impacts of development on residential amenity are, that is a material consideration. However, we're dealing with a use, a lawful use, so there's no development, if you like, in terms of the continued use of the property as a holiday let.
Okay. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. First one, I'm right, am I, that the proposal involved changing the existing garage into living space? In which case, does that effectively mean that there is a loss of one existing parking space? And my second question is, do you know whether the original planning approval for the dwelling required that all vehicles are able to enter and leave the site in a forward gear?
I'll need to revisit the terms of that original permission. With regards to the first question, it's shown on the presentation. So the existing dwelling there, obviously you've got an existing garage, which I'm assuming you can park a vehicle in. So there is displacement or loss of one space there, but there still remains space within the site curtilage for up to 3 vehicles to be parked off the highway.
Okay. Got nobody else? You want to ask a question, Councillor Butt? You'll have to be a lot slicker putting your hand up, I'm afraid.
White Beam Cottage, this drawing you've got here, we've got a large red hatched area, which doesn't seem to have much relationship to what we could see when we went round the building. Like, there was only about 6 foot at the back of the building, and this looks like we've got an entire, what have you, we've got a whole other garden. Is there something that I'm missing here, or have you got the wrong bit crossed up?
That's a plan that's been submitted to us by the applicant's architect. I think it's fairly accurate. The hatched or the shaded area represents the extended, or part of the building to be extended. And if you can see just to the right of that area, you've got an outbuilding associated with the adjacent property. When I visited the site yesterday, we looked at the extension from that area, and there was a small sort of passageway, and I think that is reflective or indicative of what's shown on that plan.
Right, excellent. Yeah, you're spot on. Apart from that, on page 79 of our report, it's a much bigger property. I'm sorry, you're like,
you want me to comment on that? I just need to have a look at.
I don't know.
page
I think you
79.
should notice.
Sorry, page 79.
Page 79, yeah.
Can't be.
That's Darwin House.
Yeah, it starts from 95 onwards, Councillor Buckle.
Am I on the wrong White Beam Cottage?
Obviously.
I think you're on the wrong page.
In that case, I withdraw my question.
So we'll forget that. Thank you very much. So I'm going to move into debate. Councillor O'Brien.
Well, I think I'm sure I'm not alone in believing that planning should be able to control the use of holiday accommodation. There should be a requirement for a formal change of use when permanent accommodation is changed to holiday accommodation. And I'm certain that this is something which my party is addressing, but we'll have to wait for the next election for it to come into effect. And at present, we have to go with the current planning rules, which do not, as we've heard from our officers, rightly or wrongly, and I think it's wrongly, they don't prevent a residence being used for holiday accommodation. I think we just have to accept that, whether we like it or not, and therefore we have to judge the application on its design merits, its conservation merits, if you like. And while I do think there's a case for the applicant to have to demonstrate that 3 vehicles can park satisfactorily within the site, and not just park, but I think each of them should be able to exit and enter the site independently without requiring any of the others to move first. As I think if that is not the case, then there is not, in effect, there is not room for 3 vehicles to be parked, because I think that implies that they each have to be able to get in and out independent of one another. So if that could be demonstrated, and I think that does need to be demonstrated myself before the before an approval notice were issued, I think we have to support the officer's recommendation. I think if he were asked, our officer would say that if we were minded to refuse the application, the prospect of us winning an appeal would be minimal in this case, but perhaps our officers could comment on that.
I say that was a fair summary. Nothing to add other than that.
Okay, Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's overdevelopment. This, I'm looking at, again, as Neil said, it's very narrow around that corner. The property is nearly touching the other property up back. I think it's overdevelopment. And by overdevelopment, if it's going to be a studio or a bedroom, it's another extra room, and it's probably more cars. So it's totally wrong for this property is being overdeveloped. There's no doubt about it, and I'm against it being overdeveloped. Because it's encouraging more people to come to holiday lets. More cars will be there, and we've got to put a stop to this sort of thing, really.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as I said in a previous application, and I think as council and as a planning committee, we should be looking at villages with dwellings as primary residences, and this is clearly not that. You know, I have listened that they may be there 10 weeks in the year, but that's at least 42 weeks when it's clearly a holiday let, and as we've heard, there are at least 40 holiday lets already in Brassington, and I absolutely realise that it's difficult to say, well, no more. I mean, it's the same problem that we have in Matlock on Dale Road, where we say no more. but, you know, we can't do that. So, you know, I am torn a little bit on this one, but I am coming down on refusal on the basis that there will be an impact on the road network. There will be parking problems. It's a very, I do know this lane in Brassington, and there will be an increase in noise levels. And I do know also that, you know, we have environmental health have got powers about noise, but, and this is no criticism of them, but they can't control it. It cannot be controlled. They've got the powers, but, you know, they have to, it has to be proven, and it just doesn't work. So on balance, I'm opposed to this application.
So you wanted to move it for refusal, Councillor Burford?
Yes. Got to think of a reason now.
Yeah. Chris will come back on it.
I should have said that I agreed. Was it Peter who said overdevelopment of a restricted site?
So just to clarify, there's three strands, I think, to your motion there. So overdevelopment, one. You mentioned the impact on local or the road network. I think if members were minded to refuse the application for that reason, my advice would be to defer the application to seek independent or the advice of the local highway authority. I think you'd need their backing really to defend that its appeal. So I think we should seek deferment for that reason alone, and perhaps deferment to get a view from environmental health on noise impacts. But I think we've got to be mindful here that the lawful use is as a dwelling house, and that does allow for use of the property as a holiday let also. So there isn't this time a material change of use which we can control through the imposition of conditions.
So are you happy to go down the route of deferral and see it, let it come back?
Yeah, I am actually, yes. I mean,
Okay.
just looking also at the officer response on this sheet that we've been given, I am surprised really that it says the proposal to extend the property is being presented as a householder application, and it is intended that the building used as such by persons living together as one household and should be assessed on this basis. It clearly isn't. It clearly is. 42 weeks of the year, it's a holiday let.
So you're quite happy to move for deferral. Councillor Slatter, does that find a second?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in debate? Councillor Lees?
Yeah, does this include what Councillor O'Brien said about the going in forward and coming out forward out of the property? Could that be another?
Yeah, I think Councillor O'Brien made a valid point about manoeuvring within the site, and I think if in asking the local highway authority to look at the application, they'd be considering parking provision, manoeuvring space, and wider impacts on the highway network. So all those things would be considered as part of that.
Okay, members. So it's been moved and seconded for deferral, as set out by Chris, Councillor Lees, Burfoot, and Slack. All those in favour of deferral, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So it's been carried, so it's been deferred. Thank you very much. Come on, Mr. Stock, you're next. Sorry. Anyway, this is application 5.8. Application number 22/00644, Stones Builders Merchants, Wood Street, Wirksworth, Derbyshire. Enlargement of existing ground floor retail units, change use and conversion of storage buildings to use Class EG1I, office and 7 apartments, and demolition of workshop, building erection of replacement building comprising 4 number apartments. I don't think there's any late representations on this, so we'll go straight to you, Andrew. You know the procedure, but you've only got 4 minutes today. Sorry.
Perfect, thank you.
So I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. Planning permission is sought for the change of use and conversion of the former Stones Builders Merchants premises to self-contained residential unit on the ground floor and 7 apartments within the remainder of the building. It is further proposed to demolish the existing workshop building to the rear excuse me, and erect a two-storey apartment building comprising 4 residential units. I commend the case officer's thorough and complete planning committee report, which sets out in detail the material planning considerations relating to the proposed development, which we welcome, and the officer's recommendation of approval. Planning permission has previously been granted for the approved scheme, as currently proposed tonight, back in 2013, albeit this was approved at appeal. The permission was not implemented and has since lapsed. However, importantly, the principle of redevelopment of the site for residential use was established following the approval in 2013, as confirmed by the case officer within their report. The former 1930s cinema building commands a prominent location within Wordsworth Town Centre and also lies within within the conservation area of Wordsworth 2. Therefore, special care and attention has been given to ensure that the proposed change of use and conversion of the building and a wider redevelopment of the site respects the character and appearance of the area, whilst also preserving the conservation area. The retention of the ground floor retail unit would maintain an attractive shop frontage on the main thoroughfare through the town, with the office unit above providing some employment opportunities over and above what is currently available on site. The creation of 8 apartments within the remainder of the cinema building will contribute towards meeting the council's assessed housing need, whilst also supporting the vitality of the town centre by introducing more people into the town centre, particularly during the evening and at weekends. The proposed sympathetic conversion will maintain the historic character of the former cinema building along the road frontage, with changes to the side and rear elevations modernising what otherwise are unattractive elevations. The former workshop building will be replaced as it's unattractive and detracts from the character and appearance of the conservation area. The proposed new bespoke apartment building will be of a similar scale to the existing workshop, but seeks to achieve a balance between a modern design with traditional palette of materials, which we believe complements the conservation area. The proposal includes a number of solar panels on the south-facing roof of the former cinema building. This will assist in meeting the renewable energy objectives placed at local and national level. Overall, when having regard to the condition of the existing buildings on site and the site itself, the proposed development will provide an overall enhancement to the character and appearance of the conservation area by virtue of a sensitive redevelopment of the site. It's also relevant to note that the council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The tilted balances therefore applies, meaning that planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the framework as a whole. It's considered that the proposal before members this evening represents a sustainable form of development in line with national and local planning policy, but will also enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area, while also contributing towards the council's objectively assessed housing needs. I therefore respectfully invite you to follow the advice of your officers and support the application tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Very succinct. Who's doing this one? Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep this very succinct as well. This is a major development, and members looked at the site yesterday. This scheme, as mentioned, essentially this scheme was approved at appeal, but that permission has lapsed because it was never implemented. But nevertheless, that is a material consideration in the determination of this application. The scheme is essentially the same in terms of design, amenity, and conditions have been recommended reflecting the appeal decision. We consider this is a sustainable development in that it retains an important building and an active use at ground floor. There has been a change in policy since the appeal decision. This application now proposes a number of dwellings which requires a provision of affordable housing, and this application responds to that. I'm proposing 3 number affordable flats in the new building to the rear of the site, and a contribution for the remaining third of the dwelling, which would be secured by a Section 106 legal agreement, along with the requirement in the neighbourhood plan to retain the dwellings, all the dwellings, as principal residences. And therefore the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and prior entry into the legal agreement.
Right, thank you very much. Questions, members, or would you like to speak in debate, Peter? Okay, I'll put you down for that then. Anybody want to? Neil, question?
I have a question. What were the reasons for refusal before the appeal was won in 2017?
Embarrassingly, I can't answer that question, Councillor Buttle. I think it may have been design related, but well, Councillor Slack's nodding, so I think that's probably accurate. But I don't want to confirm that.
What it was refused for previously was the roof. They wanted to bring out the character of the surrounding area with only slates, and it was metal roof. It went to appeal, and the appeal, he cleared it, he says it's all, you know, past it. So only a minor technicality.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else wanting question? No? We'll move into debate, so I'll move to you again, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased about this, really, because this property's been hanging about for quite a long while. It's been looked a bit shabby, and it needs the sort of old cinema needs coming up to its best. Like the flats and have been marvellous, really, because it's got a stipulation where Wiltshire Town Council local plan is geared to. It's mainly for local residents, so that's already in there. So it's really good, and I'm really very, very pleased to put this forward, Chair.
So you're very happy to move it, are you, Peter?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the visit yesterday, I was very impressed with the visit as well, and the fact that they also retaining the cinema, which was quite impressive on the main street, I think, and also the rest of the development. I think will be a great benefit to the people who work with us. I'm happy to second it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is a really good application. I'm delighted to support it. There's one aspect of the report which is rather hidden away, and that is the reference in relation to the affordable housing provision to first homes. Now, as a council, we've never really debated the first homes idea. And I have to say there's very, very little that this government does that I support, but its approach to affordable housing policy is an exception. And you'll see that there is a requirement for at least one of the affordable homes to be a first home. Now, what that means is that it has to be available for sale to an individual or a family who are first-time buyers, and it has to be at a 30% discount. So what that means, if the relevant property was offered at a market value of 180,000, there would be a discount of £60,000. Now, I think that's a marvellous incentive for young people in Wirksworth to move up the housing ladder. And I hope the applicant will consider making more than one of the affordable units a first home. I think it should be two. And I think as a council, this is the first time we have a first home included in our planning consent, in our development programme. And I think it's something we should celebrate. So I would urge us as a committee to, as I said, to celebrate the fact that we're now providing a different form of affordable housing that enables young families to get onto the housing ladder and to be able to afford to buy a new home and not just be expected to rent one. So I do hope that we will look, as I said, to celebrate this, and we'll make sure that we issue appropriate publicity. Congratulations to the applicant for including this this initiative in this development. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Nobody else down on my list, so it's been moved and seconded for approval as set out in the report. All those in favour, please show. Any against? So that's been carried unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least is application item 5.9, application 22/00651 ALS Scaffolding Services Limited, Sunnyside Farm, Whiteleys Lane, Tansley. So it's change of use. So now I've got the agent here, Mr. Ian McHugh, to speak in favour. You have 4 minutes. If you can do less than 4 minutes, that'll be good, because hopefully we can get on by 9:30 or set off. So anyway, over to you.
I understand. I will be brief, promise.
Thank you.
My name is Ian McHugh. I'm the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant. And thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. The officer's recommendation is welcomed by the applicant, but whilst the report addresses the main issues and concerns with clarity, the applicant wishes to emphasise the following matters. A, the building and its adjoining land and buildings have a long-established lawful use for commercial stroke industrial purposes. This has been achieved through the granting of the planning permission and the lawful development certificate. Secondly, the existing scaffolding business has no restrictions in terms of its hours of operation, and it has been intensively used since 2008. As part of the application, you will be aware that the applicant has provided detailed information on traffic movements to and from the site. In addition, it's also pertinent to note that there is also a current HGV operator's licence for 2 HGVs. Thirdly, I think it's fair to say that the storage of scaffolding is a noisy activity due to the regular loading and unloading of scaffolding poles, boards, clamps, etc. And this is in addition to the regular movement of vehicles along Whiteley Lane. It's contended that there's no reason to think that the application proposal will be any worse in terms of noise and disturbance. You will have noted that your environmental health officer does not object, particularly as the applicant has offered to restrict the hours of working and to ensure that no operations take place outside of the building. Concern has been expressed by third parties that the proposal will present risk to highway users, including users of the public footpath. However, the Highway Authority has raised no objection. And in that regard, it is noted that one of the Highway Authority's duties is to consider the safety of highway users, and that includes people on foot. The Parish Council refers to the fact that the applicant no longer lives on the site or close by. We ask that you give that little, if any, weight, as it has no significant bearing on the main planning issues or on the principle of the use. The parish also refers to the availability of other sites which would be more suitable in their opinion. However, this is an existing commercial building in an established industrial location. It would not be sustainable to leave it empty, particularly as there are no other obvious uses for it. Finally, I can confirm that the applicant has no objection to the conditions as recommended by your officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's doing this? Are you doing it, Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Members visited the site yesterday to appreciate the location of this particular building and its relationship to established employment and industrial uses within the locality. The history of this site is set out in detail in the officer's report. You'll note the main reason for the condition in respect of that 2008 permission and the comments of the local highway authority. Any intensification from the use of the building for the purposes proposed wouldn't be sufficient to justify a highway recommendation for refusal. We're happy that the use wouldn't result in any unacceptable residential amenity impacts or effects. And you'll note the comments of the environmental health officers in that respect. So we have recommended the application for approval in accordance with the requirements of the development plan, and happy to take questions at this stage.
No, thank you very much. Just before we move on, I'll just move an extension for 15 minutes. So I'll move that second. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. So anyway, members, questions? Any questions, Councillor Burfoot?
Thank you. Am I correct in saying that Derbyshire County Council have consistently objected to any increase in the use of this access road? I'm not really very clear what the position of the local highway authority is. It seems a bit confusing.
Yes, the highway authority previously recommended refusal of I think it was a cycle repair or distribution place, as set out in the application section of the report. However, they reflected on current highway advice at this moment in time and have indicated that the proposed use of the building, based on trip generation data, wouldn't result in a increase in traffic movements to and from the site that would necessitate or justify a recommendation of refusal on highway safety grounds.
If I may, another one, Chair.
Okay, so
I noticed under 5.4, public rights of way, Derbyshire County Council, they're saying they object to the proposal on the grounds that should heavy goods vehicle traffic increase as a result of the change of use, public safety will be jeopardised along the access road. So, are they objecting?
I think those comments have to be read in conjunction with the comments from the local hire authority. So what they're saying is that current trip levels associated with the scaffold business appear to be of a level commensurate with a single B2 use. So the hire authority is saying that there wouldn't be any intensification of use. That overcomes to some degree the comments of the public rights of way section of the local highway authority at the county council. You'll note that they've made reference to their previous objections in terms of the implications on the public right of way that follows the route of the access, and they've requested a footnote in relation to the footpath as well.
Okay, Councillor Burfoot. Any more questions? No? In which case we'll move into debate. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we was on the site visit yesterday. Yeah, quite a narrow lane. The goods, heavy goods vehicles do travel up and down that lane, and obviously it's quite acceptable. And I'm happy to move officer's recommendation.
Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, like Councillor Lee yesterday, I visited the site. I was quite impressed with the presentation on the site, and if you can listen to the presentation now, so I'm happy to second it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to speak in debate? Councillor Burfoot.
I'm not happy with it. It seems to me that this application is just too vague as it stands. You know, we're not absolutely certain what sort of activity is going to happen, and we could end up with intensification of this substandard access. I think it's an unmade single track. It could have a detrimental impact on residential amenity. I think there are justifiable reasons put forward by the Ramblers Group and the Peak and Northern Footpath Association that we don't seem to be taking into account. So I shan't be voting for it. I'm inclined to say that it should be deferred for more information as to exactly what the use is going to be.
Okay, Councillor Burfoot. I've got nobody else. Councillor Hughes.
This is quick.
Please.
Can I ask the examples of use that this could be put? That's all really.
Yeah. So B1 classification is now a light industrial use, and it's now comes under commercial commercial use classification. But that a B1 light industrial use would be use that would be compatible in a residential area. This is for a B2 use, so that's a general industrial use, which tends to involve more noisier uses that wouldn't be compatible in a residential area normally. So it includes things like car garages, service MOT type centres, sort of general industrial uses that attract some form of noisy activity.
Wood workshop, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, got nobody else. Councillor Buttle.
Who owns the road? Is that Highways? If it turns out to be not up to scratch, would Highways be required to actually put it right?
The application site includes all of the access. So if the applicant, we can have a look on the application form to see if the applicant has stated they own the site, in which case the indication there would be that they would be the owners of the road. We can have a look in the application form to clarify that.
Could we condition them to improve the road to make it good?
If we just check the status of the road first, and then I'll come back to that.
Right.
We've found the application form, so let's have a look, see which certificate was signed. Yeah, certificate A has been signed, so the applicant has stated that they own land to which the application relates, and if all of that land edged red forms part of the application site, and they've indicated they own the access road.
Okay.
Does that mean that we could say, could you make this road good? before, as part of the condition for the change of use?
It comes back to the reasonableness and such a condition passing the test that we have to apply. We have to accept that the building is already there and already has a use associated with it. And what the Highway Authority is saying is that the proposed use is no more intensive in terms of traffic movements than the existing use. There wouldn't be a reason to impose a condition to improve the surface or the road in that respect.
Well, I thought it was perfectly reasonable to change the use of the building, but the problem is the fact that the Northern Footpath Society, the Ramblers Association are unsure about the safety of that road. And would it be reasonable for us to ask the applicant to make the road safe for those people?
No, it wouldn't on the back of this application in officer's view.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor O'Brien, if you could be succinct, please.
I can. The situation here is that we've got an application for one of the buildings on site, the biggest building. There are two other buildings, as we know, which currently are established as having a general industrial use. So we're effectively going to have three individual different buildings with potentially different occupiers, different businesses using them. Now, I understand that I accept and agree that the Highway Authority are happy that the access onto the public road is quite acceptable. But given that we will now have three separate buildings and therefore potentially three separate enterprises, I do think it is reasonable for us to expect a condition such that there is at least one passing place on the access track. To avoid a situation where we have a number of vehicles trying to exit or enter it at the same time, being independent businesses, and resulting in not just congestion but environmental damage. I do think it's entirely reasonable to have a condition such that, as I said, there's a requirement to provide at least one passing place on the access lane. I don't know whether the proposer and seconder will be willing to consider that.
Councillor Lees? Councillor Donnelly? Okay. In which case I'll move to the vote. It's been moved and seconded for permission to be granted subject conditions with regard to highways, matters and hours of operation. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? That's been carried. It's been approved. Anyway, item 6 is just for noting, so I'll move it. Second. All those in favour, please show. Any abstentions? Anybody against? Thank you very much, committee members. And we'll see you again in September. Thank you very much.